Chapter 30:10. But as for whether we can succeed or not, that will depend on the will of the heavens. Mo Lien held her little hand and said softly, "What I mean is, even if we really can't save senior sister Sue, you can't be too disappointed." He was really afraid. Thinking about the 2 years she disappeared, he couldn't help but feel a little panicked. He was afraid that the little fellow would be disappointed and sink into her pessimistic mood again. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to see the light in her eyes. So at this moment, his heart was full of hatred for Jing Minyao. If she hadn't come back from the dead, Jojo wouldn't have coveted the Jing family's sacred weapon. The little fellow held his large hand and nodded vigorously. "Don't worry, I will adjust my mood and definitely won't let myself sink into it." Mo Lien nodded and said softly while holding her little hand, "It's said that this soul-gathering bell can only be used 3 times. And as far as I know, when the bell was in the Jing family's hands, there were only 2 chances left. This response was wasted on Jing Minyao, so there's only 1 chance left." Arbor subconsciously clenched her little fist. "I wonder who has this thing now. Princess Jing?" Although Princess Jing was a scheming person, Arbor actually admired her magnanimous temperament. Compared to Jing Minyao's incompetence, this Princess Jing was simply the Jing family's glory and hope, the perfect example of a bad bamboo producing good bamboo shoots. "Let's test it out first." Mo Lien narrowed her eyes and chuckled. "Anyway, there will be plenty of opportunities along the way." Arbor thought that was right and pulled her husband back to the deck. The moment they stepped onto the deck, they saw Jing Minyao leaning against the railing and staring at them silently. Arbor didn't speak to her and walked straight to Holy Sun Mi Yen. "Hey, look at the sky, it's going to rain tonight. Tell the boatman to hurry up, don't get caught in the middle of the river. With the storm, the boat will—" Hey. Shut up." Holy Sun Mi Yen really wanted to reach out and cover the little fellow's crow mouth. "What are you saying? Wasn't the weather perfect? Why would there be a storm? Do you think you're an emissary of the heavenly faction? Do you think you can just say that the wind will blow and the rain will fall just because you say so?" Peepa. As soon as he finished speaking, a bolt of lightning rushed down and struck the side of the mast, scaring the boatman. The corners of everyone's mouths twitched as they looked at the calm Lady Xiqiao with strange and indecipherable expressions. Holy Sun Mi Yen opened his watery eyes wide. He raised his head and looked at the pitch-black sky. Immediately, he felt somewhat uncomfortable. "Hurry up! The storm is coming!" Xiao Mu hollered at that Holy Sun Mi Yen and grumbled, "With your ship's sailing speed, the secret realm will have already ended by the time you reach it." This time, nobody treated it as a joke anymore. Holy Sun Mi Yen rushed all the way to the small control room and roared at the captain, Old he, stay calm." The storm arrived in less than a quarter of an hour. Everyone couldn't help but look at each other in dismay. Everyone silently chanted in their hearts, "Stoic face, you jinx! You're too smart." Crack! An S-shaped lightning split open a crack in the horizon, and the dark night was instantly illuminated by the lightning into a snowy day. Chapter 30:11. Coo. The familiar chirping instantly stimulated Arbor's senses, causing her to be on guard at once. She raised her hand and gently swiped it, and a delicate crow repeating crossbow appeared in Arbor's hand. From the horizon, the coo sound could be clearly heard. Arbor looked up and saw 7 or 8 giant birds with black wings and sharp beaks flying in the direction of their ship. At the same time, the entire Du Chunjiang was filled with a layer of intertwined lightning. This lightning was intertwined in the sky above Du Chunjiang, dark purple with a hint of inky color, as if it could fall down at any time. Holy Sun Mi Yen was stunned for a moment and muttered to himself, "The sky above Du Chunjiang is forbidden to fly. No living thing can fly above Du Chunjiang. So what's going on with those big birds that suddenly flew over?" Arbor coldly glanced at Holy Sun Mi Yen. "Isn't this your bird?" Hearing her angry tone, Holy Sun Mi Yen couldn't help but retort, "How is this my bird?" "Don't deny it," Arbor said coldly to him. "You know very well what kind of shady business the Sun Moon Temple is doing in the dark." Holy Sun Mi Yen was even angrier. He opened his mouth and was about to refute when he saw the little girl turn her head away, looking like she was too lazy to talk nonsense with him anymore. He couldn't help but feel suffocated. Arbor stretched out her arm and steadily held the crow-repeating crossbow. She directly shot a crow-gold arrow from it, aiming at the nightcaw bird in the air. With a swoosh, the crow-gold arrow was like a white light cutting through the night sky, flying towards the leading big bird like a meteor catching up with the moon. It hit the target in one shot. The big bird let out an ear-piercing chirp, struggling to flap its wings, and suddenly fell from the sky. Bang! It crashed into the water. At the same time, the nightcaw birds that were originally hovering back and forth in the sky were bombarded by the sweeping thunder and lightning above Duchunjiang. For a moment, there were sharp chirping sounds. 7 or 8 nightcaw birds rampaged in the air and were constantly shot down by the thunder and lightning. Xiao Mu's gaze was a bit hesitant as she met Emo Lian's gaze. Was there something wrong with the nightcaw bird's brain? Why did he appear in Duchunjiang, a place where flying was prohibited? Who were they trying to attack? Or perhaps, some idiot had hastily gathered them and completely forgot about the fact that Duchunjiang was forbidden from flying. Arbor shifted his gaze to Nie Yaoguang and glanced at her. Naturally, he could not tell anything from her expression, but Arbor had a strange intuition that this matter was most likely caused by this brainless saintess. What kind of ghost bird is that? It can even swim in the water. A Hong Fu Academy student who was leaning against the railing of the deck couldn't help but exclaim. Everyone looked in the direction of his finger and saw that the few big birds that had fallen into the river had already retracted their wings slightly. They swam wantonly in the water and pecked at the bottom of the ship. All the students secretly cursed in their hearts as they stared with their watery eyes at the edge of the ship's railing and looked down. Shit! These damn birds are pecking at the bottom of our ship. Just as the nightcaw bird was about to move, the storm that could no longer control itself finally swept over with a ferocious momentum. A thick bolt of lightning coincidentally struck the head of one of the nightcaw birds, causing it to fall into the water. Chapter 30:12. Suddenly, a large, slippery water snake's tail burrowed out from the bottom of the water and directly whipped back the nightcaw bird that wanted to peek out of the water. This nightcaw bird was probably beaten senseless. After it fell back into the water, it didn't emerge for a long time. The river water boiled like boiling water, and the level 10 divine beast that had appeared on the riverbank earlier suddenly appeared again. With the thrill of revenge, it fiercely swept its tail at their ship. Sniff, sniff, sniff. The water snake's tail, which carried a trace of electricity, heavily whipped the ship's railing and directly pierced through it. The students who were originally standing beside the railing hastily retreated. Everyone reflexively activated their defensive spiritual weapons to withstand the violent wind and rain outside, in addition to the occasional flash of lightning. This was truly a trap. They encountered this kind of trap on their first night at Duchunjiang. It was all the little stoic's fault for jinxing things. Truly, whatever she said came true, whatever came was unlucky. Look at the current situation. Fuck, it was simply unbearable to the extreme. At this time, everyone was caught in a dilemma. If they continued to let this water snake wantonly destroy their ship, everyone would have to go into the water. If they wanted to fight this water snake, they would have to tread on the waves and rise into the air to deal with it. However, with the lightning above their heads glaring at them like a tiger watching its prey, no one could fully concentrate on the battle under these circumstances. Arbor aimed at the water snake's tail and fired 2 arrows. The crow-gold arrows created sparks when they rubbed against the large water snake's scales, infuriating it on the spot. It hissed and stared fixedly at Xiao Mu with its cold, triangular eyes. It raised its long tail high up and smashed it at the people on the deck. "You're courting death." Arbor narrowed her eyes and suddenly leaped, about to jump into the river. Prince Mo, who was constantly paying attention to his wife's every move, jumped in fright when he saw this and hastily reached out to pull the little fellow back. Mu Xingchen was also startled and blocked Arbor with his hand. "Younger sister, what are you doing?" "Of course we're going to kill it, pull out its teeth, and give them to Lotus as refining materials." Everyone couldn't help but be speechless. This little girl spoke as if she wasn't going to kill a level 10 divine beast, but was only going to deal with a small low-level spiritual beast. Wasn't he overconfident? Didn't they see that Holy Sun Mi Yen, a spiritual venerable, was still considering how to attack? You suddenly want to jump into the river after slapping your head? How much confidence do you have in yourself? Mo Lien grabbed her little hand worriedly to prevent her from jumping down. The Holy Son of the Divine Hall is here. Before we enter the secret territory, the Divine Hall should have the responsibility to protect us. At this moment, Holy Sun Mi Yen was holding up a defensive barrier. Hearing this, he couldn't help but want to spit on Mo Lien's face. What about the responsibility to protect them? Then who would protect the people in the Divine Hall? At this moment, Holy Sun Mi Yen saw that both of them were looking at his face. He was so angry that he didn't know where to vent. The wind and rain are getting heavier. Let's talk inside the cabin first. Boom! The bottom of the boat seemed to have been hit by something heavy, and the whole boat couldn't help but tremble. At this moment, the boatmen all looked as if they were mourning for their loved ones. They shouted at Holy Sun Mi Yen, "Lord Holy Sun, it's not good, it's not good. You're the one who's not good. Your whole family is not good. Go to sleep, come back tomorrow morning at 9:30 to catch up on the chapters." Chapter 30:13. What happened? Holy Sun Mi Yen grumpily roared. One of the boatmen said while trembling with fear, "Lord Holy Sun, the ship is moving sideways. Water is entering." Everyone silently cursed in their minds. This was terrible. Water was entering the ship. Could it be that they had to freaking swim across such a huge Duchunjiang? Everyone looked at each other in dismay. The Holy Sun was furious and roared, "What are you all standing around for? Go down and see if you can salvage the situation. All of you come with me. Hurry and deal with that water snake." The little stoic looked up at her husband. When Holy Sun Mi Yen pointed at a series of you, just now he pointed at Sir Jojo. But didn't her husband say that the temple could resolve this kind of situation by itself? Why did he have to drag Sir Jojo in? The little fellow suspiciously swept Holy Sun Mi Yen a glance. The latter grumpily turned around and shouted at her, "Hurry up! Mushroom, what mushroom? Hurry and come over!" The little fatty, who was called to repair the ship, nimbly moved his chubby body and ran off with several temple priests. The remaining people temporarily followed Holy Sun Mi Yen to the railing and used the power of the 5 spirits to attack the nightcaw birds and large water snakes below. This time, no one could continue to conceal their strength. They collectively attacked the things in the water and attracted their attention, no longer damaging the ship's hull. That level 10 divine beast was extremely powerful. Amidst the wind, rain, thunder, and lightning, it nimbly moved like a bolt of white light. From time to time, it would burrow out from the bow and swing its tail. From time to time, it would also stick its head out from the side of the ship and deliver a fatal blow to the people repairing the ship below. Many boatmen lost their lives in its hands, and miserable screams could be heard from below from time to time. Arbor coldly swept Holy Sun Mi Yen a glance. "Have your people go down. Fight it at close range." This large water snake was so slippery that it could most likely dodge a long-range attack. In this way, not only would the people on the deck be wasting their spiritual energy for nothing, it wouldn't be of much use. At this time, Holy Sun Mi Yen was also enraged, and he turned to glance at Mo Lien and Duanyu. "You, come down with me." Sir Jojo glanced at Holy Sun Mi Yen expressionlessly. Following the direction of Holy Sun Mi Yen's finger, he moved to the side. Then, Holy Sun Mi Yen's finger fell on the face of another person beside him. That person was the black-bearded old man beside Madame Goen. He was a level 5 divine realm expert, Mr. Zhao Guochang. Holy Sun Mi Yen was slightly dumbfounded. He was clearly pointing at the little stoic just now, but this damn doll actually dodged to the side without any trace of politeness, directly entrusting the mission to that black-bearded elderly man. Zhao Guochang's complexion was also very unsightly. He had already expended a lot of divine energy to resist Xiao Mu's divine energy ball just now. On top of that, he had also expended quite a bit of divine energy from attacking the great water snake earlier. If he could avoid going down to face the water snake, it would be best not to go down. Mr. Jojo threw a contemptuous glance at Holy Sun Mi Yen as if saying, "Are you all right? I'm still a baby. How could you ask me to do such a dangerous thing?" Holy Sun Mi Yen couldn't help but twitch his mouth corners. When he was selecting people, he naturally selected the strongest to go with him. Although this damn doll's realm didn't look like much, it was obvious that she had plenty of good stuff on her. Chapter 30:14. With this little fellow assisting him from the side, his battle prowess would definitely increase by several levels. Duan Yu couldn't resist wanting to laugh. He took out a raven bone fan from his sleeve and leisurely fanned himself. "What? Mr. Zhao doesn't dare to go down?" Mo Lian didn't say anything and merely looked at that elderly gentleman with a faint smile. Zhao Guochang was a bit angry out of humiliation. Ever since he broke through the scope of a god realm cultivator and made a name for himself, no one had ever dared to speak to him in such a tone. This junior in front of him made him extremely angry, but he couldn't flare up for the time being. Mu Xingchen summoned a long sword from his conscience and walked to the railing. He turned to glance at Zhao Guochang. "Sir, please." Simply baffling. Zhao Guochang glared angrily at these juniors, but he couldn't vent his anger at all. Simply abominable. What were they trying to do by forcing a duck onto a perch for? Madame Gowen's expression flickered and she quickly said, "What are you all doing? Mr. Zhao is old. Duan Yu suddenly laughed and shook his head in disdain. "So he's a cowardly bandit. All right then, let's go." Let alone a god realm expert who couldn't bear to hear such words, even a random mystic realm cultivator wouldn't allow someone to crown him with the words, "cowardly bandit." Zhao Guochang couldn't help but be enraged, and he yelled at the top of his lungs, "Go!" This meant that he was convinced. Mo Lian glanced at him with a spurious smile. She leisurely removed her black velvet cloak and jumped onto the railing with a whoosh. Zhao Guochang's brain heated up, and he also jumped onto the railing and jumped down first. It was a miserable storm below, and the waves were as high as a 2-story building. As soon as he went down, his whole body was drenched. The night cowbirds cooed, and their eyes flashed with green light as they swarmed towards him. Madame Gowen was very anxious and shouted sternly, "What are you all still standing there for? Quickly go down and help Mr. Zhao." From this, it could be seen that Holy Sun Mi Yen was a kind person. Almost without saying anything, he also jumped down. Qin Xian, Qin Xian, and Ming Yasi also leaped onto the railing. They cast a sidelong glance at Duan Yu and Mo Lian, who were standing on the railing and admiring the scenery, and silently cursed in their hearts. Shameless, shameless. After tricking the others down, these two actually had the nerve to continue watching. Here Mu Xingchen was also an honest child. He originally wanted to jump down with Holy Sun Mi Yen, but Duan Yu tugged at him. Hence, he stood there in a daze and looked back at the two of them. After Zhao Guochang and Holy Sun Mi Yen jumped down, they were surrounded by a large flock of night cowbirds. At the same time, that huge water snake also came out from one side and stared at the two of them with a pair of creepy triangular eyes. Chila. A bolt of lightning swept across the water. This water snake was clearly a fellow with thunder spirit energy, so it could fearlessly advance and retreat with a sense of propriety and avoid the lightning bolts that filled the sky. Zhao Guochang reinforced 3 layers of defense on his body, and his water spirit struck back, colliding head-on with the oncoming lightning bolt. Chila chila, sounds made people's hair stand on end. That lightning bolt abruptly broke through his water spirit, and an L-shaped sawtooth wriggled out from within, crashing towards Zhao Guochang's body with a whoosh. Chapter 30:15. At the same time, Prince Mo narrowed his eyes and moved like a rainbow flashing across the moon. Raven Moon was dyed with a speck of pitch-black cold light, and it cleaved a scarlet flame chain towards the water snake Zhao Guochang in front of her. After a loud splash, a scarlet wall of fire rose up from the water and burned fiercely in the night. At the same time, Duan Yu's raven bone fan also moved. Thousands of cold specks flew out and formed a circular encirclement, abruptly attacking Zhao Guochang's chest. These two people suddenly attacked almost without warning. Following this set of movements, they flew down and rushed behind Zhao Guochang like lightning. Zhao Guochang was shocked almost instantly. He simply couldn't believe that these two people would attack him for no reason under everyone's watchful eyes. However, there was no time for him to ponder. Raven Moon's sword light had already broken through Zhao Guochang's defenses and arrived in front of him. Zhao Guochang's eyes darkened, and he shouted angrily. A scale-like defensive item quickly formed on his chest, and he shouted, "Punk! You want to kill me? You're still too, Chi." A scorching flame attacked Zhao Guochang's chest. He originally thought that this godly armor could absolutely block any attack from these two juniors. Unfortunately, Zhao Guochang truly overestimated himself. Bam! He was sent flying by that fierce flame and retreated several steps. When he looked back in horror, he saw the water snake's sinister head peeking out from behind his head. Its gaping maw sent chills down one's spine. Zhao Guochang's body suddenly shrank, only to hear a kacha sound of bones breaking, accompanied by a sharp pain. Zhao Guochang only felt that his left shoulder was almost completely torn off, the pain causing his whole body to tremble. "Mr. Zhao!" Goen couldn't resist shrieking. Mr. Zhao, this deity realm expert, was her greatest reliance on this trip. Now, Mr. Zhao was beaten half to death by two juniors before they even entered the mystic realm. How could she endure this? Pfft. Mr. Zhao spat out a mouthful of blood from his throat. With a roar, he stretched out his other uninjured arm and used all his strength to support the water snake's ferocious head. The big water snake hissed twice, and its body couldn't help but twist twice, throwing out huge waves. Its pair of triangular eyes coldly stared at Zhao Guochang in front of it. Zhao Guochang was in so much pain that his body trembled slightly. Just as he was about to call for his spirit beast, the thousands of cold lights had already arrived in front of him. Without any delay, they shot into his body. With a series of muffled sounds, Zhao Guochang's body was like a sieve that had been shot through. Small light spots appeared on his body one after another. Then, like a ball that had leaked air, his body began to gasp for air. Holding a long staff, Holy Sun Mi Yen stared blankly at the scene before him. There was almost no room for him to react. It had only been 3 minutes since Mo Lian and Duan Yu joined hands, yet Zhao Guochang was already shot into a sieve. His entire body was covered in blood and bubbling with blood. No, it wasn't. This wasn't right. Holy Sun Mi Yen blankly thought. Just now, he clearly told everyone to join hands to deal with that big water snake. But why did the two of them, how did they attack Zhao Guochang? Before this, the two of them didn't give any warning, and he had never seen them discuss it with each other. This tacit understanding was too terrifying. That's it for now. We'll continue at midnight. Prepare to burn incense for the new year. Pray that I'll be prosperous in the coming year. Chapter 30:16. Sir Jojo watched the scene before him with sparkling eyes. He abruptly turned around and punched Madame Goen's face. "No one will protect you now." Madame Goen was startled, and she reflexively bounced back before reflexively blocking with her hand. Bam! The defensive shield on her hand was instantly shattered by Arbor's punch, and she was sent flying backward by the force of the impact. Madame Goen crashed heavily into a wooden window on the side of the ship and flew in through the broken window before smashing onto the ground. She was dumbstruck for a moment. What? She was actually punched into the cabin from the outside by the little girl? Everyone stared at the little girl dumbfoundedly, unable to speak for a long time. The little girl's bad habit of taking action as soon as she said she wanted to. It was simply shocking. Wait, shouldn't they be allies right now? Evidently, in the little girl's eyes, people like Madame Goen couldn't be considered her allies at all. Previously at the Three River Pier, the little girl hadn't been able to find a chance to deal a vicious blow to Madame Goen due to the protection of that deity realm expert, Mr. Zhao. However, this didn't mean that she had forgotten the previous incident. Even Queen Fu Sha, who didn't mind the commotion, couldn't help but shudder. She didn't expect this girl to be so ruthless. Moreover, it had been a while since the incident, yet she was still bent on teaching Madame Goen a lesson. Xiao Mu stomped over and circled into the cabin through the hole in the window. She coldly said, "It's impolite not to reciprocate." Everyone, fuck, it was clearly such a vicious incident, but why did they feel like laughing? It's impolite not to reciprocate? Why did these words sound so familiar? Didn't the little fellow already nag about it when she was teaching Madame Gowan a lesson? Could it be that the lesson from the first half wasn't over yet, and it continued until today, and the lesson only ended in the second half? Queen Fu Sha twitched her mouth with an odd expression. She recalled that they had merely eaten the other party's barbecue, but the freaking little stoic made them vomit for a full 10 hours. 10 hours! Now, whenever her subordinates saw someone barbecue, their hair would stand on end and they would keep a respectful distance. This was simply throwing up psychological trauma. In the future, even if the barbecue was placed in front of them, they probably wouldn't be able to eat it. What a shameless little pervert! Queen Fu Sha cursed in her heart. At this time, Arbor had already walked to Madame Gowan's side. Looking at her frightened eyes, he twirled the long sword in his hand. I let you go again and again. Do you think I'm afraid of you? What do you want? Don't act recklessly. If the great emperor knows, if you know, then you know. Arbor plunged his sword into Madame Guo's thigh. Madame Gowan was in so much pain that she sat upright. She twisted her body in fear and crawled backward. You? Don't come over, don't come over. Arbor reached out and gently pulled out the sword from her leg. He asked coldly, have you thought about how you want to die? A few drops of dark red blood fell from the sword, but there was not a single red mark on the sword. Madame Guo's eyes widened in shock as she stared blankly at the little girl in front of her. Yellow goat. Huang Yang. Madame Gowan seemed to have thought of something and shouted loudly. Chapter 30:17. Arbor glanced at her contemptuously. Don't shout. It's useless even if you shout until your throat breaks. The little fellow used her sword to draw 2 lines in front of her chest. I'm afraid that Mr. Zhao of yours is already dead. Now it's your turn. Arbor saw that she had one hand behind her back. She knew that she was up to no good and that she was definitely up to something. Sir Jojo only looked at the woman in front of him expressionlessly. He did not say anything. Duanmu Qing stepped in from outside the hole and hurriedly called out to her. Jojo, is there some trouble? As soon as he finished speaking, he saw Madame Gowan, who was lying on the ground, suddenly straighten her body and roared. Little slut, I'll let you have a taste of my power. Madame Gowan's eyes were filled with vicious anger. She stretched out her hand and waved a handful of powder. Duanmu Qing hurriedly rushed forward. He originally thought that the little girl would be caught off guard and suffer a great loss. Who knew? The little girl was already prepared. She calmly took out a black frying pan from her inner world and slapped it directly on Madame Gowan's face. With a loud bang, Madame Gowan let out a miserable cry and fell backwards. Her big head heavily knocked against the deck of the boat, making a loud thud. The frying pan swatted away most of the powder, leaving only a small portion floating in front of Arbor. However, Sir Jojo was very guarded against this woman. He had already set up several layers of defense around himself without leaving a trace. Therefore, Madame Gowan's little bit of powder was unable to break through her defense and be absorbed into her body. At this time, Duanmu Qing had already arrived in front of Arbor. He anxiously grabbed her arm. Jojo, are you all right? What can happen to me? Sir Jojo said expressionlessly. He used the frying pan to slap Madame Gowan's face again. The one who's not all right is this fellow. Duanmu Qing looked at the little fellow in front of him speechlessly. He coughed lightly and nodded. Looking at this lady's pitiful appearance, it was obvious that she did not get any benefits from Jojo. Madame Gowan suddenly burst into tears. Crown Princess, you can't kill me. The Crown Princess. I am the Crown Prince's aunt. If you kill me, how can you face the Empress in the future? Crown Princess, I know I was wrong. Why don't you spare me this time, Crown Princess? Madame Gowan cried with snot and tears. The scene was a bit funny. Xiao Mu's cold gaze swept over her, and she involuntarily creased her brows when she saw this fellow crying to this extent. She had never seen such a situation before. If this national security agency insisted on fighting with her to the end, she would just kill her. But now, he was kneeling on the ground and begging for mercy while crying out loud. It was really a bit of an eyesore. The little fellow pursed his little mouth and forcefully flung his sleeve that was grabbed by Madame Gowan. He expressionlessly turned around and walked towards the deck. Stinking shameless thing. He was already so old, but he was still crying like a baby. In the future, when he saw Sir Jojo, he had to hurry and take a detour. Don't talk nonsense all day. Arbor had just arrived on the deck when she saw the big water snake creating a 3-meter-tall splash of water. It was like a raging wave that came towards her. She did not panic at all. She only glanced at the wave indifferently. Then she raised her small hand and drew a circle of defensive array glyphs around her. Sleep, come back at 9:30 tomorrow morning. Chapter 30:18. Bang! While water splashed everywhere, Arbor had already flashed out like a bolt of lightning. The teleportation talisman flashed and disappeared, allowing Arbor to suddenly stand on the ship's railing. The river breeze brushed against Arbor's face, and her skirt fluttered. Arbor's black hair fluttered slightly, and the 3-foot-long sword in her hand glinted coldly. Her icy eyes had already met the great snake's gloomy eyes. Hiss! The little white snake on her wrist swiftly slithered and abruptly opened its towering mouth, biting at the oncoming great water snake. That great water snake certainly didn't expect the little girl to have a great void great snake's sacred beast coiled around her body. It seemed to be taken aback for a split second, and its snake head abruptly tilted to the side as it retreated in alarm. However, it was already too late. The little white snake's towering snake head had already lifted up, and its mouth bit down on the great water snake's vital point like a whirlwind sweeping away clouds. Chee! The great water snake hissed and swayed its body repeatedly, retreating with all its might in alarm, wanting to continue retreating back into the river to hide. At this time, the little white snake had already transformed into a great void serpent several dozen meters long, so how could it allow this guy to continue escaping? The little white snake opened its mouth and bit down on a square inch below the great water snake's head. In less than a few seconds, black smoke billowed out from the water snake's body, eyes, and mouth in wisps. That appearance was a bit frightening. After Mo Lien and the others finished dealing with the night cowbirds below, they turned around to look at the ship's railing. They saw the little stoic standing there like an expressionless little puppet. Her pitch-black eyes didn't move in the slightest under the night sky. And a great white snake several dozen meters long was loosely coiled around her several times in several coils of its tail. Its abdomen moved as it swallowed the water snake in front of it inch by inch. Holy Sun Mi Yen couldn't help but shudder at that terrifying appearance. The students of the other academies couldn't help but scatter like birds and beasts, shivering as they hid behind the destroyed cabins and by the broken wooden windows, watching the scene in front of them in horror. What kind of beast was this beside the little stoic? It could actually swallow a level 10 divine beast alive without any hesitation? Wasn't this too cruel? On the other hand, Xiao Mu creased her brows. Seeing that the white snakelet had already swallowed 2/3 of the large water snake, its stomach rumbling, she couldn't resist stroking the white snakelet as she muttered to herself, "Too full, spit it out." Finally, the little white snake swallowed the big water snake whole, including its skin and bones. The snake's belly bulged, and it even burped a few times. Crown Prince Mo and Duan Yu looked at each other, both at a loss for words. Burp. The little white snake suddenly shrank inch by inch, and its body returned to its original slender appearance. However, its abdomen was still bulging, as if it was several months pregnant. Burp. Its pitiful pair of large, watery eyes looked straight at Xiao Mu. Arbor couldn't help but knock on its head. "I told you to eat too much, but you didn't vomit when I told you to. You got indigestion from being greedy, so who are you blaming?" Sir Jojo quickly took out several bottles of digestion pills from her inner world and fed the little white snake one by one. As she fed it, she discovered that the little white snake's head slowly drooped down and curled up in her hand, unmoving. Arbor jumped in fright and quickly poked it with her finger. "Ming Ming! Ming Ming!" The little fellow was a bit anxious and poked it with her finger again. Chapter 30:19. Ming Ming. At this time, Mo Lien and Duan Yu had already jumped out of the water. Under the night wind, the water droplets on their bodies were slightly flung off, and with the evaporation of spiritual energy, the water droplets on their clothes instantly dried. Jojo, don't be anxious. Mo Lien flashed to her side and gently grasped her hand. The little white snake swallowed a level 10 divine beast's flesh and crystal core, so it needs some time to digest. I reckon this sacred beast is about to advance, Duanyu said. Master, it looks like Mingming is about to advance. Put it on planet Shaji for its advancement. The sapling Qiuqiu's words soon confirmed their conjecture. Xiao Mu nodded and fed the white snakelet several more pills to aid in digestion and advancement. Only then did she put it away on Shaji planet and have the sapling Qiuqiu find an open space for it to prepare for its advancement. Qiuqiu solemnly said, Master, Mingming will probably need to sleep for a while. That divine beast is very helpful for its advancement, but it needs some time just to digest it. At this time, Arbor also discovered that the great ape on Fish Orchid Planet was pounding its chest and stamping its feet while howling at the sky. Arbor expressionlessly communicated with the sapling mentally. What is it doing? Qiuqiu chuckled mischievously. The great ape is at the pinnacle of spirit beasts, so it needs some divine beast bloodline to advance. Realization dawned on Arbor. He didn't expect that the little white snake would swallow a level 10 divine beast in one go, so it naturally couldn't squeeze out any bloodline. Arbor was a bit curious. Does a spirit beast have to have a divine beast bloodline to advance to a divine beast? Of course. The sapling quickly explained to the little master. Master, divine beasts aren't everywhere. Normally, they need a bloodline inheritance. It's even harder to find a sacred beast bloodline. Even if their ancestors have a sacred beast bloodline, not every one of them can become a sacred beast. The probability is still very small. However, if the ancestor does not have such a bloodline, then there is not even such a small probability. Arbor nodded. Oh, tell it to stop howling. We'll find another one for it later. She had many small beasts that were top-grade spirit beasts by her side. If that was the case, she would have to find a few more divine beasts for them to advance. Master Silver, little white snake has gone to evolve. Do you want to bring Qiuqiu out with you? Your master isn't that weak. The little stoic said expressionlessly. Soon after, she thought for a bit and brought out the blue spirit snake emperor, who was currently frolicking in the 100 Poison Valley on Fish Orchid Planet. The little blue snake was dumbfounded. When it raised its little snake head and saw its little master, it couldn't help but shiver. It shrunk its head like a human and quickly closed its mouth to hide its two fangs. Little Master couldn't be thinking about Snake Tooth again, could she? It took so long for it to grow back. Sob, sob, sob. Xiao Mu expressionlessly said, What are you cowering for? Isn't it just taking 2 drops of your venom every 3 months? It doesn't hurt. The little blue snake blinked its dog eyes cutely and rolled around in her hand like a corpse. Then, its snake body stiffened with its belly facing the sky without any integrity. Duanyu couldn't help but twitch his mouth when he saw this. He exchanged a glance with Mo Lien next to him. Were the beasts by Jojo's side all so lacking in integrity? Mo Lien gave him an especially annoying look. Thankfully, his Sir Jojo didn't like little beasts that acted cute. Otherwise, these stinky things might have to compete with him for favor. Chapter 30-20. Mo Lien was about to pick up the little blue snake and toss it away. The little blue snake seemed to have sensed an unprecedented crisis and hastily coiled itself around Arbor's wrist. It obediently coiled itself into a circle and stopped moving like a corpse. Arbor was amused. He looked down at the little blue snake before looking up at Mo Lien and Duanyu. With a swish, thump, thump, thump. A series of urgent sounds came from the bottom of the ship. They soon saw the little fatty's nimble body dashing forward as he shouted, There are several hundred to 1,000 sword-toothed fish digging into the ship below. I think the bottom of the ship is going to be pierced through very soon. Everyone was grief-stricken when they heard this. It wasn't that they were afraid. If it were any other time, the worst that could happen was that the ship would sink, and they would just fly up into the air. But in this current situation, with such dense thunderclouds hovering above Duchunjiang, they would dare to hack you to death if you dared to fly up into the air. Who dared to fly up recklessly? That would be asking for a beating. Thump, 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 thump. The sounds of the ship's bottom being pierced gradually grew louder in the stormy night, causing everyone's nerves to tighten to a critical point in an instant. Holy Sun Mi Yen rushed onto the ship despite the torrential rain and solemnly said to everyone, "Everyone, conserve your spiritual energy and pay attention to your defenses. When we enter the water later, we will need a defensive barrier to support us. Who knows how long we will struggle in the water?" On the side, Qi Xianxian rolled up her small sleeves. "Let's fight it out with them." How could a group of spiritual cultivators like them be afraid of several hundred sword-toothed fish? What a joke! Crack! The boatman shrieked in panic. "The bottom of the ship is leaking." Arbor turned to look at them with a frown. This ship employed more than a dozen normal boatmen. If they entered the water, they wouldn't have any chance of survival. The teeth of the sword-toothed fish could chew them into pieces at any moment. Holy Sun Mi Yen hastily said, "Hurry and gather around. Follow behind us. When we fall into the water later, try your best to find wooden planks for cover." Kacha kacha. Some of the sword-toothed fish jumped up and jumped onto the deck of the boat. Everyone was about to kill them. Arbor suddenly said, "Wait." Akir had long found her an eyesore. Upon hearing this, she sternly shouted, "Wait, what? Don't you see that these sword-toothed fish are about to chew up our treasures? What are you waiting for? Kill him." Akir stepped forward with her sword and cut the sword-toothed fish in half without saying a word. At the same time, a stream of venom spurted out from the belly of the sword-tooth-long fish, flying straight towards her face. At the same time that Akir cried out in alarm, she felt her body being pulled back and involuntarily fell over. ACI quickly pulled her to the back, but a young girl from the Hong Fu Academy standing beside Akir was out of luck. A portion of the splattered venom landed on her face and hands. She screamed in pain and subconsciously covered her face with her hands as she screamed. As if her face was burned by fire, it quickly turned red, swollen, and rotted. A piece of flesh from her chin fell to the ground with a plop, causing Akir to widen her eyes in horror. This venom was so terrifying. Arbor quickly stepped forward, pulled out a silver needle, and pricked the girl a few times. Then he stuffed a pill into her mouth and said with a solemn expression, "Swallow it." The other students from the Hong Family Academy gasped in astonishment. Chapter 30:21. The girl reflexively swallowed the pill, and the rotting condition on her face improved slightly. It didn't continue to worsen. However, when everyone saw her face, they couldn't help but gasp. Her face was completely ruined. Not only was her originally delicate and pretty face extremely swollen, but there were also 2 holes in her chin and cheeks that exposed her ghastly white bones. Akir shrunk her neck in fright. She took a step back and hid behind Yas. However, several students from the Hong Academy couldn't resist reprimanding her angrily. "Why are you hiding behind him? If you hadn't recklessly swung your sword to chop the sword-toothed fish just now, how could this have happened? Brainless guy." Jinx. Akir was also extremely aggrieved. How could she have known that the sword-toothed fish was so disgusting that there was actually a bag of poison hidden in its stomach? How could it give someone such a thing before it died? Did they think she was willing? It wasn't like she did it on purpose. The disfigured girl covered her face with her hands and sobbed. Arbor was a bit vexed and couldn't resist shouting, "All of you, shut up." She threw a medicine bottle to the girl. "Apply it once in the morning and night. You'll recover after a month." Everyone looked at her in a daze. They saw that the little stoic still didn't have much of an expression, and her gaze was even colder as it swept over the sobbing girl. Her gaze was really cold. This was what everyone thought in their hearts. That girl dazedly clutched the medicine bottle in her hand and raised her head to glance at the little stoic. At first, she was frightened by the little stoic's cold gaze, and then she felt as if a warm current flowed into her heart. The girl inexplicably felt that although the stoic face in front of her was young, for some reason, it made people want to trust her unconditionally. Thank you." The girl pursed her lips, her voice as weak as a mosquito's bite. After this incident, Akir also quieted down. She shrunk her neck and hid behind ACI and Ali without saying anything else. The boatmen shivered as they lay on the ground and said to Holy Sun Mi Yen, "Sir Holy Sun, save us, save us." Not only were the sword-toothed fish's teeth formidable, but the venom in its stomach was even more frightening. They were just ordinary people. If they were bitten by the sword-toothed fish, they would definitely die. However, if the venom accidentally splashed onto them when they were slaughtering the saber-toothed long fish, then with their identities as ordinary people, they might not even be as good as the young girl and would die in a matter of minutes. Holy Sun Mi Yan's expression was also rather grave. He turned to look at the little stoic and asked gravely, "Do you have any methods?" Inexplicably, he felt that this little girl, who was full of treasures, should have a way to help everyone out of this predicament. The little fellow raised her eyebrows and glared at him. "Didn't you bring this disaster upon yourselves? Now that you can't control yourself, you want to ask me for help?" Holy Sun Mi Yen said, "Is there a misunderstanding? Now we're all in the same boat? Was he crazy to attract these things to harm everyone, including himself?" The little stoic rolled her eyes at him. "You don't know how to cause trouble, but don't tell me other people can't." Holy Sun Mi Yen reflexively glanced at the silent holy nun, Nye Yaoguang. For some reason, he had an intuition that the little stoic was targeting the holy nun. Chapter 30:22. Holy Nun Nye Yaoguang, on the other hand, was looking down without any expression on her face. When she saw the Holy Sun's gaze, she bowed and said respectfully, "Holy Sun, let us go down and slaughter the sword-toothed fish." The moment she said that, the few priests of the temple looked at her as if they had eaten a fly. What kind of joke was this? Since she knew that the sword-toothed fish had poison in their stomachs, she still wanted them to go down and die. There were not only hundreds and thousands of sword-toothed fish gathered below, there were probably close to 7 to 8 million of them. As the saying goes, 2 fists are no match for 4 hands, not to mention so many sword-toothed fish. The few priests stared at Holy Nun Nye Yaoguang as if they were looking at a lunatic. Is there something wrong with your brain? Even with so many people going down together, they might not be able to handle so many sword-toothed fish, much less 30 to 40 of them from the temple? The holy nun's expression was calm. With a flip of her hand, she took out an exquisite ball with multicolored light flowing around it. "You all only need to assist me. Once I keep all these sword-toothed fish into this exquisite ball, there will naturally be no danger left." Whoa, the exquisite ball in the holy nun's hand is a storage spiritual artifact. Everyone's eyes lit up as they landed on her hand. That storage spiritual artifact looked like it was overflowing with light. From the outside, it looked very beautiful. On the other hand, Mo Lien merely glanced at her before curling his lips slightly and shifting his gaze away. The little fellow tugged at her husband's sleeve curiously. "Lien, is her exquisite ball very powerful? The material is not bad, but the forging standard is a little bad." Mo Lien whispered in her ear. "This exquisite ball is made from deep-sea cold iron, and there are more than 10 kinds of good materials in it. Previously, when we were forging weapons for Little Fatty and the rest, if we could have 3 or 4 of them, we could have forged their weapons into level 15 divine artifacts. What a pity!" Arbor blinked. "In that case, the material of this exquisite ball is good, but the forging is not satisfactory?" Mo Lien nodded and murmured something into her ear. Afterwards, he winked at her with an expression of watching a good show. A faint smile appeared on the little fellow's stoic face, and he nodded his head with a grin. Seeing that Nye Yaoguang was so confident, Holy Sun Mi Yen nodded and said, "Since that's the case, everyone in the divine palace will follow me down. Assist the saintess in keeping these sword-toothed fish into the exquisite orb." Saintess Nye Yaoguang was a little excited, even though she didn't show it on her face. She thought to herself that if she could subdue these sword-toothed fish that had sharp teeth and could spit poison, she would naturally be able to kill a lot of enemies in the water in a matter of minutes. She subconsciously glanced at Arbor, then turned around and led the Holy Sun and the others to the bottom of the cabin. Duan Yu glanced at Mo Lien and thought, "The saintess, this fool, is probably going to run out of luck." At this time, Madame Goen had already shakily crawled over with one leg. That robust man, Huang Yang, hurried to her side and quickly reached out to support her. He whispered, "Madam, I was held back by someone just now." Madame Goen quickly waved her hand at him, indicating for him to stop talking. She warily glanced at Emo Lien and Arbor, who were standing at the side of the ship, and shuddered all over. "Tomorrow at 6 p.m., don't wait for me." Chapter 30-23. Right now, she was truly a bit fearful of this stoic face. She secretly made up her mind to avoid provoking this little stoic if she could in the future. After suffering so many losses at her hands, Goengwa had learned her lesson. She was the dignified Madam of Goengwa. If she could avoid provoking this couple, she would naturally be able to live a good life with a handsome man. However, she had a bit of a screw loose previously and just had to target this stoic face. The stoic face wasn't an easy bone to chew. Just based on her cold and stern appearance just now, even the emperor couldn't be provoked. If she hadn't wailed loudly in the end and knelt on the ground to beg for mercy, perhaps she really would have been killed by this stoic face. Madame of Goengwa believed that in the end, the little stoic didn't stop killing her because she was soft-hearted. Why didn't she kill her? Because a coward like Madame of Goengwa wasn't worth it for her to make a move. For some reason, Madame of Goengwa had such a clear thought in her mind. She shuddered and supported the robust man, Huang Yang, by the arm. She whispered to him, "How is Mr. Zhao?" Huang Yang weakly shook his head at her. The shock in his heart hadn't passed yet. Prince Emo really didn't give Madame of Goengwa any face and killed Mr. Zhao with a single blow. The Crown Prince was warning Madame of Goengwa that if she continued, her outcome wouldn't be any better than Mr. Zhao's. Mr. Zhao truly had 8 lifetimes worth of bad luck. Just because he wanted to protect Madame of Goengwa, the couple viewed him as a thorn in their flesh. Although Huang Yang felt that the Crown Prince and Crown Princess were ruthless in their methods, he had nothing to say in response. After all, the two sides had different standpoints, so their opponents were naturally different as well. If Madame seized this rare opportunity, it was hard to guarantee that she wouldn't be so ruthless towards the Crown Princess. Although the Crown Prince and Crown Princess were ruthless, they merely struck first to gain the upper hand. Winner takes all. Wasn't Madame admitting defeat now out of fear of being beaten? Huang Yang sighed and helped the limping Madame of Goengwa to sit down on the side. He warned, "Madame, I'll help you bandage your wound first. When it enters the water later, this blood might attract ferocious beasts in the water." Madame Goen nodded listlessly and didn't say anything. She just let the gazelle do whatever it wanted. The little stoic reached out to stroke the strands of hair that floated in front of her forehead and absent-mindedly turned her head to glance at the Madam of the Ministry of State Security. Like a startled little beast, Goen sat up straight and shrunk back to the railing. Arbor looked at her coldly and then retracted his gaze. Madame Goen only felt a bone-chilling coldness. She touched her forehead and found that it was full of cold sweat. She was so frightened by this glance that she almost peed. Everyone on the ship was anxious and restless. A few students from the academy could not help but lower their heads to look into the water. From their point of view, they could only see the 5-colored light of the exquisite ball faintly flickering. It seemed that the Saintess was currently absorbing the saber-toothed fish. It would be much better if I could take away all the sword-fang fish. Even if they entered the water, they would not have to face the siege of thousands of sword-fang fishes. The little stoic reached out to hold the railing and looked down. She then blinked and shrunk into her husband's arms. "They're here." Boom. A huge tremor stole up from the bottom of the ship. Everyone, who was brimming with anticipation, was instantly stupefied by this sound. They only felt the ship violently shake and tremble. The ship, which was riddled with holes, disintegrated in an instant. Chapter 30-24. Caught off guard, everyone fell into the water like dumplings. Sir Jojo stretched out his leg and stepped on a small piece of floating wooden lattice window. He looked around and saw that Emo Lien was busy keeping the broken pieces of the exquisite ball. Countless sword-toothed fishes jumped up and down beside his feet. When they touched the wall of fire that rose from his feet, they hurriedly retreated. Xiao Mu waved her hand, and a blank storage talisman emitting a purple light flew out from her inner world. It circled around her before abruptly stopping in front of her. The peerless purple talisman shone brightly. At the same time, countless sword-toothed fishes were sucked into the talisman and circled in the air. Waves of sword-toothed fishes were all sucked into the peerless purple talisman. The flustered boatmen had just thought that their lives were over when they saw such a shocking scene in front of them. For a moment, they did not know if they were overjoyed or overjoyed. They looked at Sir Jojo in a daze and could not say a word for a long time. After Arbor sucked the last sword-toothed fish into the purple talisman, she stretched out her hand and pinched the talisman in her hand. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Their gazes landed on the expressionless young lady and thought to themselves, "This young lady looks cold, but her heart is not cold." This action really saved the majority of people. At this moment, many people fell into the water because there were no wooden planks to step on. Luckily, all the sword-toothed fishes in the water were sucked away by Arbor. Hence, there was no more trouble. At the same time, Saintess Niaoguang, whose hair was in a mess, rushed out from the bottom of the boat with a pale face. At this moment, she was dripping with water. It was unknown whether it was because of the cold or because she was trembling in fear. Her face was very pale and her body could not stop trembling. Recalling her previous actions, Niaoguang's face was pale. Behind her, Holy Sun Mi Yen and more than 30 god disciples also jumped out. Their faces were also very pale. When they were underwater, Saintess Niaoguang had indeed kept most of the saber-toothed long fishes into the exquisite ball. Everyone was overjoyed and felt that the Saintess was very reliable. She had actually thought of such an idea. And the result? In the end, halfway through, the Saintess's expression changed greatly. The exquisite orb in her hand had actually exploded. It exploded. Holy Sun Mi Yen and the followers of the divine halls were caught unprepared. While setting up multiple defensive shields, they tried their best to escape and were almost besieged by the fishes. It was a close call. Before they even returned to the Red River Canyon, 5 or 6 of the gods' disciples of the divine hall had already died. He did not die in the hands of a spirit beast or a divine beast. If this were to spread out, people would laugh their heads off. He was actually killed by the exquisite ball in the hands of the Saintess. With a sullen face, Holy Sun Mi Yen glares at the unreliable Saintess Niaoguang. At this moment, Niaoguang's face was also green and white. He still had lingering fears. She was about to open her mouth to defend herself when she saw the little girl with a stoic face use a storage talisman with a purple glow to keep all the saber-toothed long fishes. What are you doing?" Niaoguang shouted angrily. Heavens, these little things that she had taken a fancy to were all taken away by that stoic-faced girl in one go? The Saintess simply wanted to beat her chest and stamp her feet. These were the things that she had taken a fancy to first. The Saintess's expression became more and more unsightly. One moment, it was white and the next, it was black. Chapter 3025. Arbor swept her a glance and looked at Niaoguang like she was looking at an idiot. Was this person an idiot? Didn't she see that she had harvested several batches of fish from Dukun River? The holy nun was so angry that she wanted to pull out her hair. She blurted out hysterically, "This sword fang fish is what I want." Ever since she met the little stoic, the holy nun was actually gnashing her teeth in hatred. However, she had been restraining herself and didn't flare up. She also tried her best to maintain a calm attitude and turned a blind eye to the little stoic. But now she couldn't tolerate this. Why did this damn stoic face want to snatch everything? She even wanted to poke her nose into these sword fang fish that she had her eyes on. Arbor looked at the holy nun with pity. She just knew this person was an idiot. Otherwise, how could she ask such a stupid question? Your family's fish? Xiao Mu gazed at her indifferently. The holy nun choked. This naturally couldn't be her fish. It was just that she had her eyes on it. Since it's ownerless, what are you yelling about? You want it? Just because you want it, it must be yours? If she wasn't an idiot, then what was she? The holy nun naturally wasn't in a good mood when the little girl looked at her like she was an idiot. She took a deep breath. Crown Princess, Then what do you think if I buy 10 sword fang fish from you? She would most likely die from anger if she spoke to this stoic face. The holy nun felt that rather than continuing to pester this stoic face endlessly, she might as well strike a deal with her. She was determined to obtain this sword fang fish. She had to obtain it. Arbor gazed deeply at the holy nun and said meaningfully, "The holy nun is so impatient to obtain this sword fang fish because you want to nurture it into a mutated sword fang corpse fish, right?" The holy nun's face clearly stiffened, but it was only for a moment. Nie Yaoguang quickly returned to her senses and said faintly, "I don't know what the crown princess is talking about. You want this sword fang fish only because its teeth are hard and it carries poison inside its body. If you can cultivate these little things and breed them in large batches, you will be in charge of everything in the water in the future." The saintess looked angry and could not help but say, "Crown Princess, I am talking to you about serious matters. Must you speak to me in such a tone? Not for sale." With a hook of her finger, Qiaomu took out a sword fang fish with a protruding belly that was thrashing about in her hand from her storage talisman. She gazed apathetically at the saintly nun before her. Doesn't saintly nun think that this chubby little thing is quite interesting? Interesting. Interesting, your sister. The saintess was so angry that her stomach was about to explode. Her pair of black eyes stared fixedly at Arbor. Her eyes were filled with a dark light. Such interesting little fellows. I can't let you harm them. Whoosh! The saintess released a white light from her hand. The crescent-shaped blade made a circle in the air and slashed toward Arbor's neck. Holy Nun Mi Yen was shocked and immediately shouted, "What are you doing?" Arbor looked at her expressionlessly with a trace of coldness in her eyes. She stretched out her hand and grabbed the curved blade in front of her with one hand. Clang! A crisp sound rang out. The little girl's hand was as hard as jade. She grabbed the curved blade that the saintess released and clasped it tightly in her hand. "Let go." Nie Yaoguang was so angry that his face turned black. He clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. This is intolerable. Chapter 30:26. Under the command of her spiritual conscience, that scimitar moved at will and continuously twisted in Arbor's hand, trying its best to break free. However, how could Arbor give it this chance? She gazed icily at that saintess Nie Yaoguang, and the words she spat out were extremely icy and merciless. Looking for the everyone who drew their swords against her wouldn't have a good ending. At this time, the little girl's toes were on a half-broken window frame, and she was floating on the river. Her plain-colored robes were gently fluttering in the river breeze. Her appearance was like an ice sculpture, cold and merciless. Madame Gowan shuddered slightly. She still remembered that she had previously courted death like this, throwing a spiritual weapon at the little girl in a futile attempt to kill her, but in the end the unlucky one was herself. This saintess of the temple probably wouldn't have it easy either. Bang! The scimitar in the little stoic's hand didn't seem to be able to withstand that enormous force. Not only did it bend, but it also made a cracking sound in the little girl's hand. Crack! Ah! The saintess instantly felt an unbearable pain in her conscience. She reflexively fell backwards and missed a step, falling into the water with a splash. Holy Sun Mi Yen was taken aback. He quickly flew up and raised his hand to pull the saintess out of the water. Her complexion was pale, and her eyes were tightly shut, as if she was heavily injured. Holy Sun Mi Yen checked her breathing, and his gaze relaxed slightly. Fortunately, she was still breathing. At least she wasn't dead, so everything was still manageable. He turned to look at the little stoic and said sullenly, "Crown Princess, please don't lower yourself to the saintess's level if she has offended you." Arbor's expression froze, and she tossed away the scimitar that had turned into scrap metal. "Hand it over." Holy Sun Mi Yan's heart involuntarily sank. He finally understood the little girl in front of him. Whoever came to provoke her, she would kill that person to settle the matter once and for all. It had to be said that this kind of mentality was extremely troublesome. Such a lousy temperament was definitely spoiled by someone. Although this saintess was courting death, since she was a member of the temple, Holy Sun Mi Yen felt that he had the responsibility to protect her safety. Naturally, he couldn't watch as the little girl slapped Saintess Nie Yaoguang to death. If she killed the Saintess just like that, not only would he, Holy Sun Mi Yen, lose all face, but would the Sun Moon Temple still have any face left? Holy Sun Mi Yen took a deep breath and felt that he needed to have a good talk with the little girl. Although he wasn't very confident in his heart, after all, he truly understood this little stoic's temperament thoroughly after interacting with her during this period of time. This little girl was definitely not someone who was easy to talk to. Just look at the previous madam of the National Security Agency. It had been a while, but she still wanted to get rid of her. The main thing was that she had many accomplices, so it was not good to provoke her. Thinking of this, Holy Sun Mi Yan's face darkened. He wished he could shake the Saintess awake and slap her. You fucking caused so much trouble, yet you still want me to clean up your mess. You're simply too hateful. Holy Sun Mi Yen was currently scheming on how to plead with the little stoic to stop causing trouble for the Saintess. However, he didn't know that the eyelids of the Saintess he was supporting in front of him twitched slightly, and the finger resting on her side also flicked lightly. Stoic, cough, Crown Princess. Holy Sun Mi Yen had just called out to her when he saw an attack talisman flying at him. Chapter 30:27. Holy Sun Mi Yen was startled and subconsciously retracted his finger. Then he remembered that the holy nun was unconscious. If he retracted his hand, the holy nun would fall backwards? Holy Sun Mi Yen didn't hear the sound of falling into the water. He looked down and was shocked. He saw that the holy nun, Nie Yaoguang, had already woken up. She was staring at Arbor with a pair of scarlet eyes. She suddenly pounced towards Arbor like a hungry tiger pouncing on its prey. Holy Sun Mi Yen couldn't stop her in time. Because the two of them were originally standing on a log, the holy nun suddenly jumped away, causing the log to lose its center of gravity and sink into the water. Holy Sun Mi Yen almost reflexively leaped into the air. At the same time, the lightning above his head seemed to have found the target of punishment and fiercely struck down on his head. Crack! A bright light flashed in the dark night. Holy Sun Mi Yen was caught off guard and was hit by the power of the lightning. He fell into the river with a splash. The sudden sound of thunder made many people jump up in fright. At the same time, several students of the Hong Academy also jumped up about 10 feet. This was great. The lightning was like an exploding pot, crackling as it gathered and attacked the person's body. Everyone was like grasshoppers, jumping back and forth on the floating objects on the river surface. Meanwhile, on the other side, the Saintess had already jumped in front of Xiao Mu with a plop. She stared at her coldly with a pair of glowing red eyes as she crouched down on a piece of driftwood. She was like a crazed wild beast, as if she wanted to bite Xiao Mu's throat in half with a bite. Xiao Xiao! As Mo Lien flew over, he naturally became the target of the lightning bolt's concentrated bombardment. Arbor didn't panic at all. She just looked coldly at the holy nun, Nie Yaoguang. Tisk! Her cold voice slightly raised, appearing particularly clear under the night sky. So it's a corpse puppet that is evolving. I really underestimated you before. She hit it really well. At this time, the holy nun's appearance had changed a bit. Not to mention her eyes had turned red, there were even short fangs protruding from the corner of her mouth. Tian Yun's experiment began to make progress. Xiao Mu felt rather gloomy in her heart. This Saintess usually looked like an ordinary person. No one would think that she was different from the rest. Moreover, she might even be able to control the corpse poison in her body. That was why she was able to release the corpse poison with such precision, causing her body to undergo a transformation. Boom! Nie Yaoguang seemed to have gone berserk. He punched down, and the river water turned into a piece of sky, sweeping towards Arbor. This unforeseen event happened too quickly. By the time Mo Lien, Duan Yu, and the others flew over one after another, Arbor's figure had already been washed away by that monstrous wave. Saintess Nie Yaoguang's eyes glowed with a crimson-red light. After a sharp howl, some of the lower-level spirit masters spat out blood and their eardrums hurt. Holy Sun Mi Yen, who had just come out of the water, looked at Holy Nun Nie Yaoguang in shock. He didn't know what to think, but his expression was so shocked that he was almost speechless. Heavens! What kind of monster was that? Holy Sun Mi Yen suddenly recalled the little stoic's mocking words to him. Weren't these night cowbirds summoned by your temple? I am possible. How was that possible? How could their temple of light, their sacred temple of light, be corrupted by this kind of dark and evil creature? Chapter 30:28. Holy Sun Mi Yen was extremely conflicted. He felt that the little stoic must be slandering him, but he also felt that with the little stoic's aloof and arrogant personality, she would disdain to lie. Holy Sun Mi Yen only felt his entire body turn ice cold, and he hastily kicked his legs and paddled forward. Meanwhile, Mo Lien, Duan Yu, and the others swiftly moved on the river surface. Following closely behind were bolts of lightning that struck around everyone. Because of their leaping movements, the lightning enveloping the river surface collectively erupted, and the others also met with misfortune. The nether leopard that had just surfaced was instantly struck into the water by a bolt of lightning. The feeling of the electric current sizzling chaotically in his body, was especially satisfying. Qin Xian grabbed Qin Jiu's arm and scuttled out of the water. Before he could say anything, he was nearly struck by a bolt of lightning. He hastily tossed little Jiu out and also dodged to the side. That bolt of lightning just happened to land between the two of them, directly pulverizing a dilapidated piece of wood. Qin Jiu sprawled on the water surface and didn't dare to move, but his entire body involuntarily shuddered. Fuck! This bolt of lightning was truly ferocious. Where's second brother? Eldest young Sir Qin couldn't resist asking. Qin Jiu sprawled there and repeatedly shook his head. No, I don't see second brother. Damn it, eldest young Sir Qin couldn't resist gritting his teeth and turned to glare at the saintess gravely. Qin Jiu didn't dare to move at all and repeatedly asked, Big brother, what's up with that woman just now? The eldest young Sir shook his head and turned to look at the people beside him. We have to leave this place as soon as possible. This bolt of lightning only floats on the water surface. I think it's more appropriate for us to hold our breath and swim for a while, the two young sirs from the Dou family hastily said. It's all that damn stoic face's fault. Zhongli Jiwei was almost struck by a bolt of lightning, and she angrily punched the water surface. If she hadn't angered the saintess, why would the saintess transform into a monster and cause everyone to be in a mess? Enough, what's the use of complaining over there? Chen Baojia shrieked in exasperation, hurry and swim forward. A scene appeared on the Du Chun River. All the people who had fallen into the river sank into the water under the intertwining lightning. They paddled with all their might, trying their best to escape. On the other hand, Mo Lien, Duan Yu, and Duan Muqing's group had shouldered 70 to 80% of the lightning bolts. It couldn't be helped. This group of people committed crimes against the wind and openly leaped in midair, completely ignoring Du Chuanjiang's clear order that prohibited flying. It caused waves of thunder and lightning to bombard them with extreme indignation. They quickly chased after him, and Jojo subconsciously started to swim in the water after being hit by a huge wave. As soon as the little fellow entered the water, he felt like a fish in water. In the past, she didn't understand what was going on, but now she had some understanding. This probably had something to do with his bloodline. Therefore, when she was in the water, it was as if she was walking on flat ground. She could even breathe freely without any discomfort. Unexpectedly, a few rotten corpse crocodiles came out from the side and bit at her hands and feet. Arbor looked back and saw Nye Yaoguang popping out from behind her like a ghost. His pair of red eyes emitted an eerie, cold glint in the water, and his viciousness was threatening. Yet Xiao Mu merely pursed her small lips indifferently. With a light stomp of her foot, she shot out like an arrow. Those zombie crocodiles opened their mouths and bit down on empty air. The saintly nun's face was filled with disbelief. Chapter 30:29. Arbor was actually able to escape from the mouths of several corpse crocodiles? She was actually able to move so quickly in the water. Wasn't that strange? Saintess Nye Yaoguang's eyes flashed with a hint of disbelief as she quickly paddled forward. At the same time, she commanded even more corpse crocodiles to chase after Arbor. After Arbor entered the water, the more she swam, the more she found the feeling. Her small arms moved in the water as if she was walking. She stepped on the water and floated further and further away. She couldn't help but mutter in her heart, "This saintess is definitely a person with a twisted mind." Her exquisite orb was not broken by Lord Jojo, so was there a need to chase after her to kill her out of humiliation? Previously, her lotus had said that the exquisite ball was made of the best materials, but the method used to make it was inferior and couldn't hold too many things. It was absolutely impossible for the saintess to try and take in so many ferocious sword-toothed fish. The exquisite ball's self-destruction was inevitable, so her lotus was prepared to pick up the scraps of materials. From the very beginning, the saintess was confused by the explosion of the exquisite ball and couldn't find a way to vent her anger. She actually looked for Master Jojo to vent her anger for no reason. She was simply crazy. Arbor kicked her legs and slid far away. She kept paddling forward. In the vast Du Chunjiang, to be honest, she also didn't know where she was going. Logically speaking, she should be heading towards the Red River Canyon. However, Master Jojo said that it was dark and there was water everywhere. He really couldn't tell where she was. At this time, the saintess who had chased after Arbor for a long time but still couldn't catch up to her, the blood-red light in her eyes slowly receded and she seemed to have returned to her normal state. She punched the water and kicked the water. With a splash, she rushed to the surface of the water. She coughed twice and spat out the cold river water in her mouth. A pair of pitch-black pupils flashed with a cold light as she stared at Arbor's departing figure. There was definitely something strange about this woman. Otherwise, how could she enter the water so quickly? Even when she activated her special bloodline, she still couldn't deal with her. Nie Yaoguang hammered the river water twice with great force. His face was filled with anger as he let out an angry roar towards the sky. After swimming for a while, Sir Jojo looked back and saw that Nie Yaoguang had stopped chasing after him. He couldn't help but feel a little strange. The corpse crocodiles were still chasing after her relentlessly. Sir Jojo was a little annoyed, so he simply turned around and ran back. He released a few icicles from his palms and stabbed them into the heads of 2 corpse crocodiles. When the other corpse crocodiles saw that the situation was not right, they actually wanted to scatter and escape in all directions in a very human-like manner. How could Arbor allow them to escape? He immediately erected walls of water in all directions, and ran through them without any hindrance. Dozens of icicles were cast down, and the remaining corpse crocodiles were dealt with as well. After the corpses were burned to ashes, Arbor collected the crystal cores in the heads of 2 corpse crocodiles and looked around blankly. So annoying. There was water everywhere. Was she going to soak in the water for the whole night? Forget it, she should return to Paradise Planet first and let Sapling contact Mo Lien and the others. With a thought, Arbor was about to enter Paradise Planet when she suddenly realized that she had lost contact with Chio Chio. The little fellow's face immediately became gloomy, and it was so gloomy that it swam back and forth in the water. Could it be that this Du Chunjiang not only forbade flying, but also forbade spirit? Chapter 30:30. Arbor tried 2 more times but still couldn't get in. She couldn't help but sigh helplessly. Forget it, it's not hard to stay in the water anyway, so I'll just keep going. She wandered aimlessly for an entire night. Gradually, the horizon became a bit brighter. After soaking for an entire night, although she didn't feel uncomfortable, she still felt that she had to go ashore as soon as possible. This Du Chunjiang is really a damned place. Sir Jojo didn't like it very much. When a bit of red light faintly appeared in the distant horizon, the sky finally brightened. Arbor looked around blankly. She saw that the water was still, as if even the lightning above her head had disappeared. But she was surrounded by the river, and she was a little girl who didn't know where to go, so she could only continue forward with a confused expression. She swayed in the water and walked for about an hour before she finally saw a fishing boat on the river. The old man rowing the boat looked to be in his early 60s, and he slowly came over with a bamboo pole. There was also a young girl sitting at the bow of the boat. She looked to be about 18 or 19 years old, and her hair was combed into a big shiny braid. She was singing a folk song at the top of her lungs. Arbor's pitch-black eyes narrowed. She then raised her small hand above her head and waved at the old man. "Grandpa, There's someone over there. The young girl sitting at the bow of the boat suddenly cried out, unable to hide the surprise in her eyes. The boatman hurriedly rowed the boat over and handed the bamboo pole to Arbor. Arbor stretched out her foot and lightly tapped the pole. With a flip of her body, she easily landed on the boat. At the same time, the blue spiritual cleansing fire slightly evaporated her body, and her clothes instantly became dry. The young girl couldn't help but clap her hands and cheer. "Miss, you're really skilled." Arbor nodded slightly at her, and cupped her hands at the boatman. "Old man, many thanks." The old boatman was a loyal and honest person. When he heard this, he hurriedly blushed and waved his hands. "Miss, where are you going? Why did you fall into the water at Du Chunjiang?" "Yesterday, there was thunder on Du Chunjiang all night. Could it be related to this girl? I'm going to the Red River Canyon." "That's perfect. Our Little Lee village is the only way to go to the Red River Canyon. Why don't you follow us back to the village before heading to the canyon?" "But miss, it's very dangerous for you to go to the canyon alone." That big braided girl was very talkative as she chattered, but looking at the girl's skills, I reckon it won't be difficult for you to cross the canyon. "Miss, are you going to the shrine?" "The shrine is in the depths of the Red River Canyon." The old man smiled helplessly and nodded apologetically at Arbor. He then scolded his granddaughter, "Nyonyo, you asked so many questions at once that I don't know how to answer." The big braided girl called Nyonyo naughtily stuck out her tongue and said, "Miss, you don't look very old." "I'm 19, what about you?" 16. "Heh, then I'll call you little sister." Nyonyo giggled as if they were close friends. "All right." Arbor nodded. He didn't care too much about the title. She had some doubts in her heart and couldn't help but ask, "Old man, is this not the center of the river?" She remembered that their boat was destroyed halfway. It was reasonable to say that she drifted for an entire night and didn't know the direction, so she shouldn't be able to travel too far. But this pair of grandfather and granddaughter were only ordinary people, so they shouldn't be able to travel too far. Chapter 30-31. The elderly man was taken aback, but then he said amiably, "We fish for a living, so we usually only move around the river banks. We naturally don't dare to go to the center of the river. There are layers of lightning there day and night, so normal people don't dare to rashly take risks." Arbor couldn't help but be dazed. She asked softly, "Then, how far is this place from your Little Lee village?" Nyonyo laughed heartily. "Just an hour by water. We'll arrive very quickly." "Then how far is this place from the center of the river?" "Those treasured ships used by immortals take more than half a day to sail. Small boats like ours might not even arrive in 2 days." Nyonyo continued, "It's very far, at least 500 kilometers. Arbor couldn't help but be dumbstruck, unable to react for a long time. In that case, she had foolishly drifted more than 500 kilometers in the water in a single night? She didn't feel anything at all. She looked back blankly, thinking that it was no wonder she hadn't seen Mo Lien and Duan Yu's figures until now. She must have drifted too fast, so they simply couldn't catch up to her. But she really didn't feel anything at all. She didn't realize at all that she had traveled so far. Arbor instantly blushed with shame. She looked back at the boundless water and asked, "Sister Nyonyo, from Du Chun River to Red River Canyon, will we definitely pass by your village?" "Definitely." Nyonyo nodded vigorously. "Then we must pass by. Immortals can't fly in this area." Arbor nodded. "But, us older generations all say that there are immortals protecting the surrounding citizens in the river. The living people and sacrifices thrown into the river during Spring City's sacrificial ceremony have only raised a large water snake for many years." Arbor shook her head speechlessly, thinking that they definitely didn't know the reason, so she recounted everything she saw and heard on the way to Nyonyo. Nyonyo clicked her tongue repeatedly as she listened. She treated it as a fantasy story and listened with great interest. "Little sister, your group is truly too amazing." The elderly man also kept sighing. "So it's just feeding a ferocious beast." Those sacrifices that Spring City had consecrated for so many years were actually thrown to a beast. It truly left one speechless. "Sister, Xiaoli village is just up ahead. Arbor nodded and thought. Nyo said that Little Lee Village is the only way to Red River Canyon, so I'll wait at ease and wait for Mo Lien and the others to arrive. The old man pushed the bamboo pole to the shore. After the three of them went ashore, Arbor saw that although the village was small, it was very lively with people coming and going. Nyo and Grandpa are back. A fat woman greeted them with a smile, and her curious eyes wandered around Arbor. Sister Kufu. Who is this little girl? Mrs. Fu looked at Arbor curiously and couldn't help but ask. The main reason was that this little girl's appearance was too exquisite. In the surrounding villages, they had never seen such a delicate little girl. No matter who it was, they couldn't help but want to take a few more glances at her. Nyo smiled and pulled Arbor to her side. Relatives, Sister Fu, were in a hurry to go home. Make way ba. The fat woman looked at the direction the three of them left and spat, her eyes darting around. This little girl is really good-looking. I wonder where she's from. If she doesn't have any background. The fat woman looked up and almost fell over in fright. She saw a purple figure quietly appear in front of her. Chapter 30-32. The fat woman's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. The Langjun in front of her had long eyebrows, and a hint of emerald green was faintly discernible in his black pupils. His robes fluttered in the wind, and he was elegant and graceful. The light in his hand disappeared, and the woman stared blankly as he stored a boat that could accommodate more than 30 people into a talisman. She couldn't help but be shocked, and she took a few steps back. When she finally reacted, the woman hurriedly prostrated herself on the ground and repeatedly kowtowed. Immortal, please spare my life. Immortal, please spare my life. The purple-clothed man looked at her indifferently. The light in his hand expanded, and a faint shadow of a small person wearing a crimson bridal dress and a phoenix coronet slowly paced on his palm. Although the light was extremely faint, the facial features were very detailed, allowing people to see it very clearly. The woman couldn't help but tremble. Her mind seemed to explode, and she couldn't help but tremble all over. Wasn't this the little girl with a delicate and cold face that she saw just now? Looking at the appearance of this immortal-like man, could it be that the little girl ran away from the marriage, and he chased after her? He was chasing after his wife. Just now, she had the idea to introduce this little girl to the village head's foolish son and earn a generous commission. Her mother, it turned out that this little girl's background was so great. Her husband was an immortal-like figure. Damn it. Fortunately, she didn't make a move. Otherwise, her entire family might not be able to keep their lives. The woman broke out in a cold sweat in shock and fear. In her daze, she heard the man's cold voice. Have you seen it? The woman nodded repeatedly like a chick pecking at rice. She replied repeatedly, I just walked over. I went to old Mr. Wang's house at the east end of the village. It's his house. There's a big plum tree at the door. The man glanced at her indifferently and reached out to take back the strolling little person. A cold breath brushed past the woman's face, and in an instant he was far away. The woman fell on her butt and sat on the ground. She repeatedly wiped the cold sweat on her head and then subconsciously touched her neck. Fortunately, she didn't continue to court death. Why did she feel that her neck was sticky? The fat woman wanted to look down, but her head suddenly fell from her neck. She didn't see anything as her body fell straight to the side of the river. Perhaps even in death he still couldn't figure out how he had been killed. Nyo and the old man slaughtered 2 fish, steaming one and braising the other. Only then did they finish their work. The 3 of them sat around the small square table. The door to the courtyard was kicked open. Arbor frowned. He got up and walked out of the house. He saw the man standing at the door. A pair of cold eyes stared straight at him. Her heart couldn't help but shrink slightly, and her entire body stiffened for a moment. She opened her mouth and said, "Why are you here?" A bolt of lightning was suddenly released from his hand, heading straight for the grandfather and grandson pair. "What are you doing?" Arbor hurriedly stepped in front of them, using the water spirit to block his spirit lightning, and took 2 steps back. A pair of big clear eyes instantly turned red with anger. The man raised the corner of his lips and sneered, "You've never been a sympathetic person. When did you become so soft-hearted? Arbor looked at him coldly. You speak as if you know me very well. We're not close. Not close? He sneered. Probably not in this life. Arbor's eyes suddenly widened, staring straight at him. Chapter 30-33. At that moment, the little girl had the urge to run away. It was as if she had been seen through from top to bottom, from inside to outside, and she was caught off guard. She tried to secretly bring the old man and Nyonyo back to Paradise Planet, but to no avail. Seeing Omega Kotoku's cold gaze fall on the two people, as if he was going to attack someone else, Arbor made a prompt decision and put the two people into a storage talisman. She didn't have time to explain anything to them. At the same time, Omega Kotoku had already rushed forward and grabbed Arbor's wrist. In the next second, he snatched the storage talisman that she didn't have time to put away. Tisk, the second young master sneered and shook his head. I didn't expect that my JoJo would be so kind one day. But you have no enmity with them, so why do you have to be so aggressive? Arbor looked coldly at the storage talisman floating up and down in the man's hand, and her heart was in a mess for a moment. What was this person trying to do? Let's find a place to talk. There's nothing to talk about between us. Xiao Mu warily took a step back and tried to pull her wrist back from his grasp with all her might. However, his movements were very big, and he dragged Sir Jojo to his side. Xiao Mu used a Herculean effort to prevent herself from rolling into his embrace. Her almond-shaped eyes were glaring angrily, and they contained deep indignation. What are you doing? Talking about why you've been so wary of me since we first met. We didn't know each other at that time. Why do you always want to keep a respectful distance from me? Why? His fingers seemed to brush her sideburns, and he said lightly, why do you want to run away? Arbor saw that his eyes were deep, and a jade light flashed in his eyes. Although he was very good-looking, he inexplicably made people feel terrified. Her wrist stiffened slightly, and then she tried even harder to pull it out of his hand. Let go of me. The lives of ordinary people are as insignificant as ants, aren't they? A few wisps of purplish-blue light suddenly appeared between his fingers that held the talisman. Take a guess. If I destroy this talisman, will the person inside still be able to keep his life? Xiao Mu snorted and looked at him silently, not saying a word. You must be thinking that with the quality of the purple talisman, it's impossible for me to destroy it. Gongzi Omega Kotoku suddenly smiled. His eyes seemed to be shining. He looked very gentle, but it made people feel cold. That's you. The second young master finally loosened his grip and let go of her wrist. He lowered his head to look at the bruise on her white wrist caused by his fingers and frowned in dissatisfaction. Just because you can't destroy it doesn't mean that I can't. Now, do you still want to run away? He flicked the talisman in his hand and looked at her indifferently. Xiao Mu coldly swept him a glance, and her figure slightly retreated 2 steps. Gongzi Omega Kotoku's eyes moved slightly. He looked at the delicate girl in front of him and smiled. Jojo, is it really okay for you to be so cruel? Arbor looked at him coldly. After a while, she looked up and looked around. Since they're here, why don't you let them show themselves? Gongzi Omega Kotoku curled his lips and a faint smile flashed in his eyes. Chapter 30-34. You're useless. You've already been discovered by the little girl. Why don't you come out? Second young master said indifferently. 5 people came down from the eaves, laughing heartily. Only one of them, a handsome young master who was waving a fan, had a slender figure, while the other 4 had rather strange appearances. Little girl, you've got guts. A short and fat man chuckled. Arbor glared at young master Omega Kotoku angrily. Did this bastard need to find so many people to catch her? She was a mere level 11 spiritual master. Did he need to find 5 godly realm experts to catch her? He was crazy. Jojo, you'd better be obedient. Don't think about running away. Young master Omega Kotoku smiled faintly. You can't run away. Go ahead and kill her. Arbor said coldly. Ayaya, little girl, it's not good to be so cruel. A gorgeously dressed woman with fiery red lips said softly as she twirled 3 orchid fingers. Xiaomu chuckled. I can't even protect my own life, so why should I go to the trouble of worrying about other people? No one wants your life. Young Master Omega Kotoku's eyes darkened. Little girl, as long as you obediently leave with us, I can guarantee that second young master will definitely not touch these people. As that delicate and beautiful woman spoke, she threw a large coquettish glance at Lady Xiao Xiao. Lord Jojo felt his hair stand on end. Young Master Omega Kotoku glanced at her coldly. Do you think your eyes are unnecessary? That woman pouted and stomped her feet coquettishly. Annoying, you're so fierce. That little girl is pretty. It's normal for me to take a few more glances. This time, even the Taoist friends beside her couldn't help but shudder. It was obvious how mushy this person's expression was when he spoke. Are you threatening me? Arbor looked at her coldly. How can this be a threat? The woman said in a delicate voice. In this little Li village, there are at least 200 people. What does that have to do with me? Arbor said coldly. When dealing with people, one should act according to one's ability. If it's just a small matter, I'll help if I can. If I have to sacrifice myself to help them, then forget it. I'm not the savior of the world. It's better to rely on the heavens than me. When the woman heard this, she was slightly stunned. She blinked her eyes and an expression of disbelief appeared on her face. Little girl, you're too interesting. Sister really likes you. A shameless bastard, don't talk to me. Second young master wanted to laugh. He curled his lips and said, looks like you won't get what you want, Jojo. There's no use stalling for time. Sir Omega Kotoku looked at her aloofly. Mo Lien and Duan, you really can't make it over in a short amount of time. Arbor rolled his eyes. The 6 of you against 1 is an unfair advantage. Despicable scoundrel, you want me to leave with you? Dream on. Sir Omega Kotoku raised a brow. That woman couldn't resist chuckling. Oh, beautiful little girl, then what do you want to do? How about we make a bet? She couldn't even open Paradise Planet right now, so she couldn't summon any helpers. She could only use her wits and not brute force against these people. If she took a gamble, she might still have a chance to escape. Second young master stared straight at her like this. When he saw her large, lively eyes darting back and forth, he felt as if his heart was lightly scratched by a soft feather. It was very itchy. He clearly knew that she was stalling for time and waiting for help, but he actually didn't really want to go against her. Chapter 30-35. Heh, little miss wants to fight one-on-one. The woman twisted her waist and winked at her. All right, then I'll play with you. Arbor glanced at him. We agreed to fight one-on-one. If you don't keep your word and gang up on me, what do you think? Everyone's mouth twitched. That short and fat wintermelon laughed heartily. Little miss, don't worry. We keep our word. Since we agreed to fight one-on-one, we naturally won't lie to you. Hearing that, Arbor nodded. All right then, come over a little. The little fellow hooked her little finger at that coquettish woman. Let's find a slightly more spacious place to fight. You can't run away. Young Master Omega Kotoku said indifferently. Who said I'm going to run? Arbor snorted coldly. Do I look like the kind of person who would run away before the fight even starts? That coquettish woman burst into laughter and nodded repeatedly. All right. Little miss, we'll fight however you want. So what if I win? That coquettish woman giggled. Arbor felt that the thick layer of powder on her face was about to fall off. If you really beat me, then I'll help you escape. Ling, young Master Omega Kotoku's face darkened as he looked at her warningly. That coquettish woman called Ling pursed her lips and rolled her long eyelashes. We're a group of adults. We can't just bully a little girl who's just reached marriageable age. The short and fat wintermelon waved the purple gold hammer in his hand and laughed heartily. Ling, don't go easy on me. Tisk, fatty, look at what you're saying. What do you mean by going easy on me? Alright, enough with the nonsense. You come here. Arbor impatiently interrupted him and hooked her finger at that coquettish woman again. All right, then I'm coming, little miss. That woman's face was all smiles. Her slender waist twisted slightly and she floated in front of Arbor. Arbor didn't say a word and took the lead to send a bunch of attack talismans flying over. Although the woman was smiling, she was already prepared. She raised her hand and made a circle, and a white light flowed past her eyes like water. Taking a closer look, he found that it was a soft sword that was glistening with water. A stream of condensed water spirit power covered the body of the sword, suddenly stirring up streams of water light, blocking most of the attacking talismans. The remaining ones exploded beside the woman, but they were instantly blocked by the divine armor that floated up from her body. A full set of godly armor. The short and fat Wintermelon's pupils shrank slightly, and the dark light loomed in his eyes. Ling, this fellow, had only followed young master for less than half a month and had never revealed his strength in front of others. Normally, they would often hear the young master praising this person to be very outstanding, but they had never seen her fight with anyone. On the contrary, they were used to being disgusted by her every day. Unexpectedly, after seeing him today, he was indeed extraordinary. Oh my God, this guy's godly armor looks like it has already risen to the mystic grade. A small old man with a protruding mouth and monkey cheeks couldn't help but exclaim. He asked the short and fat Wintermelon, "Fatty, how old do you think this guy is?" "He should be around my age." The short and fat Wintermelon carried his purple gold hammer and said. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Then they looked at the woman in front of them who was holding 3 orchid fingers and couldn't help but shudder in disgust. Holy shit! As old as Fatty? Then he has to be around 200 years old. Dressing up like a little girl all day long, this guy must be mentally abnormal. Chapter 30-36. That woman grabbed Arbor's arm. Wait! Arbor suddenly stopped her. The woman's expression faltered slightly, and she really did stop her attack. This isn't fair at all. Arbor said expressionlessly. I won't accept it even if I lose. The woman called Ling side. Little girl, then how do you want it to be fair? The short and fat Wintermelon and the others shuddered, feeling unaccustomed to that woman's soft voice. Arbor's heart also shuddered for no reason. He said with a stoic face, You're clearly at the Transcendent God realm, but you lowered your realm and lied to me that you're at the Transcendent God realm. The woman raised her eyebrows with a grin. Then tell me, how should we fight? The short and fat Wintermelon and the others were practically stunned. They were absolutely cursing in their minds this old hag actually didn't object. The little girl had clearly guessed correctly. She was actually at the Transcendent God realm? An old monster at the Transcendent God realm. Ling. The second young master felt that she had gone a bit overboard. She should subdue the little girl as soon as possible instead of standing here and indulging this willful and reckless little girl. Ling blinked. It's fine, Shinshin, don't worry. The little girl can't run away. Shinshin, everyone shuddered in disgust again. The little stoic turned her head away in disdain. How about this? You punch me once, and I'll punch you once. We'll use 3 punches as the standard. Whoever leaves this circle first loses. Everyone couldn't resist sputtering with laughter. Seeing the little girl's glare, they involuntarily coughed and hastily held back their laughter. The little girl actually wanted to compete with Ling purely in strength? Wasn't this a joke? A little spiritual cultivator like you is the biggest joke in the world. Competing in strength with a transcendent god realm. How much are you courting death? Little girl, I can't hurt you. Shinshin will kill me. Speak properly. Chinexen couldn't bear it anymore and glared at her. So fierce. Ling pursed her lips and smiled sweetly at Arbor. Jojo, can't you be obedient? Stop talking nonsense. Can you beat me? The little fellow looked like she was jumping up and down, eager to give it a try. All right. I'll use 10% of my strength to fight you. Arbor chuckled, drew a big circle on the ground, and jumped in first. You first. Ling felt like laughing. He nodded and threw a punch. It was as if a gentle breeze had brushed past the little girl's face. The little girl had cast a double talisman on herself, and her small body did not move at all. When it was Jojo's turn, The little guy naturally activated a few speed and strength talismans and threw them all at Ling. Feather didn't pay attention at first, but he was pushed near the white line by the little girl twice in a row. At what kind of messy talisman is this little girl opening? It seems rather strange. Are you still not going to use your strength? Jojo said coldly. If you don't use your strength, you're going to lose. As she spoke, she proudly placed another gravity talisman on herself and blinked. You can't push me away. Qin Xian's heart stirred, and her gaze fell on this little girl without blinking. Ling's eyes flashed and he chuckled. How naughty. Thus, he used 50% of his strength and swung it at the little girl's body. Qin Xian felt her heart shrink, as if something bad was going to happen. She was about to stop it. She saw that the power fell on the little girl. She spat out a mouthful of blood, and her figure flew out in an instant like a kite with a broken string. Halfway through, she nimbly flipped and escaped. Chapter 30-37. Little stoic face was so cunning. This thought flitted across everyone's minds. She had deliberately put all kinds of talismans on herself at the beginning to give people the illusion that they could not do anything to her if they did not have some skills. In reality, the stoic student had been thinking about running away from the beginning. What nonsense was she spouting about? How could this lady surrender without a fight? In a situation where there was a great disparity in strength, in front of 6 deity realm experts and above, she could just laugh at them. Who would want to fight with them? At the cost of a small injury, Sir Jojo borrowed Feather's turbulent power to fly far away. If she did not run now, when would she run? Everyone only saw the small figure turn slightly and run away like a wisp of smoke, leaving as fast as lightning. Feather widened her eyes in shock and blinked. She could not help but exclaim, Heavens! The little girl is too shameless. How could she deceive me like this? Before Feather could finish her rambling, Sir Omega Kotoku glared fiercely at her. The second young master waved his sleeves and chased after her in the direction of Arbor, using his divine sense to lock onto her figure first. Everyone hurriedly chased after him, following the little guy's figure as he flew off. As Sir Jojo ran, she ate pills along the way and slapped all kinds of speed-increasing talismans on herself as if they were free. 1, 2, 3 Her speed increased bit by bit. She felt the strong wind blowing against her face, causing half of her face to hurt. Sir Jojo was so miserable. She did not cultivate normally, but she was really unlucky at the crucial moment. Lady Xiao Xiao could be considered to be diligent and hardworking normally, but this second Qin was a pervert to begin with, and he even brought along a bunch of old freaks. Sir Jojo instantly felt that she was so miserable that she was about to explode. This was not her fault at all. It was definitely because of bad luck. When one's luck was bad, it was useless to say anything. The little fellow's mind was filled with these ridiculous thoughts, but the speed at which he was running did not change. He ran all the way into the distance, constantly trying to see if he could sneak into Paradise Planet to hide. After a few failed attempts, Sir Jojo could not help but feel helpless. Qin Xian's cold voice sounded in his ears, "You can't escape. Why aren't you stopping?" "But I'd be a fool if I stopped." Lord Xiqiao turned around to take a look, and her heart couldn't help but tremble. Damn, Omega Kotoku was getting closer and closer to her. Was this still too much? Arbor did not dare to be distracted. She ran all the way forward. Seeing that the terrain in front of her was getting higher and higher, she rushed forward without a care. It wasn't until he reached the edge of a cliff that his footsteps suddenly stopped. Even so, there were still several small pieces of gravel falling down from his feet. When he looked down, the fault was so deep that he couldn't see the bottom. He couldn't see the end of it. "Jojo, where do you think you're going?" Qin Xian's figure flashed and stood 5 steps away from her, looking at her indifferently. "Run, I'm running to death. This place is really not good. Why is it still in the no-fly zone?" The short and fat winter melon caught up with her, panting. "Miss Qiao, you should stop. You can't run away." What a joke. Second young master had already locked her divine sense. Where else could she run to? Lady Jojo turned her head and coldly glanced at Qin Xian, a trace of a sneer appearing at the corner of her mouth. Chapter 3038. At this moment, Qin Xion's heart skipped a beat, as if it was being ruthlessly torn apart by a ruthless palm. She felt extremely uneasy. "Wait a minute." Qin Xion blurted out. The little fellow jumped down the fault without any explanation. Her swift and resolute manner of wanting to get rid of him instantly pierced the second young master's broken heart. She would rather die than stay by his side? It was as if that tattered little figure appeared in front of his eyes, wriggling with all her might. Even if she could not walk, she still wanted to escape far away. It was clearly not like this before. Why did the two of them end up in such a laughable state by a freak combination of factors? The Omega Kotoku's eyes instantly turned malicious. The dark green luster in the depths of his eyes rose and fell, dark and treacherous. Ling ran over as well. Seeing this, he could not help but cover his mouth and exclaim, "Ah, the little girl's temper is so fierce." The second young master ignored him and jumped down the fault as well. Ling and the others were also stunned. They did not expect the second young master to jump down with the little girl. They hesitated for only a second before jumping down as well. The fault was very high from the ground below. When they jumped down, it was as if they had fallen into a bottomless pit. They were mercilessly pulled down by a suction force. "We've been tricked." The Omega Kotoku was pulled down halfway by the suction force. He immediately reacted. Frowning slightly, he tried his best to break free from the suction force below the fault and float up. It was a pity that the area around Du Chunjiang was restricted from flying. As soon as he had a thought, he floated up into the air and saw a layer of thunderclouds floating in the sky. Then, without any explanation, it struck towards his head. It really was very effective. At the same time, Arbor, who had used a black-level invisibility purple talisman to hang at the bottom of the cliff, slowly revealed herself. She released a wisp of wood essence from her fingers, which grew into a vine and flung it towards the top of the cliff. She took the opportunity to climb up and stood on the edge of the cliff. She looked down coldly. Just now, it was actually just a smokescreen. Why would she disregard her own life and foolishly jump down when she could not float? Under normal circumstances, Omega Kotoku would never fall for this trick. After all, he still had her divine sense locked, so how could he fall for her petty tricks? It was obvious that his mind was in chaos and he had lost his usual calm judgment. But why was it like this? Who would follow their pet to the grave when it died? This is not normal. Lady Qiao Qiao frowned slightly. Then she turned and ran toward Du Chunjiang. As long as she jumped into the water, with her inhuman speed in the water, even if the Omega Kotoku had a spiritual weapon, it would be impossible for him to catch up with her. Xiao Mu calculated in her mind before running in Du Chunjiang's direction. Calculating the time, Mo Lien and the others should be arriving soon. At this moment, thunder continued to rumble in the Du Chun River. An afterimage of a ghost face appeared between the lightning layers. Like a tornado, it swooped down from above. It landed on the surface of the water with a loud boom, enveloping the area within a radius of several miles. This layer of golden light was so dazzling that Prince Mo and the others could not help narrowing their eyes. After Jojo was swept away by the current, Mo Lien, Duan Yu, and Mu Xingchen took the lead in chasing after him. They chased after Jojo's aura, but a wave of zombie crocodiles appeared midway and blindly bit at them. After dealing with this wave, they were soon trapped by the golden light formation. Chapter 3039. Upon closer inspection, this golden light was originally a confinement formation made up of 128 jade talismans. After the talisman array suddenly enveloped them, the light of thunder and lightning began to sizzle within its range. Boom! Coupled with the lightning bolts that came crashing down from the thunderstorm outside, the lightning bolts inside this confinement formation sizzled chaotically and hacked at the three of them. Mo Lien swept away a wave of lightning with a wave of her sleeve, and her expression darkened. This small confinement formation's layout was very exquisite. Normally, there would always be a time when the talisman energy inside the formation was depleted, and the lightning would naturally disappear. But it was different now. The thunderclouds above Du Chunjiang outside were gathering as if they were endlessly replenishing this confinement formation. This would be a bit troublesome. The three of them looked at each other, bewildered. Mo Lien said coldly, "Come, gather your power and hack at one point." Duan Yu and Mu Xingchen nodded in unison. At this time, our dear Duan Yu didn't bother to bicker with Prince Mo anymore. He flashed forward and raised his hand to release a wisp of sacred energy. Following Mo Lien's wisp of energy, he swept it towards a floating jade talisman above the confinement formation. Bam! A corner of that jade talisman shattered, and the entire jade talisman formation started floating and shaking. It rearranged itself and circled around again with a whoosh before completing its arrangement. Mo Lien's eyes flickered. This talisman formation will automatically repair itself. That's right. Mu Xingchen nodded. Based on the talisman energy contained in this talisman formation, this talisman master should be a black-level great talisman master or above. I'll use a spirit fire formation to trap a few pieces. You two use your power. Mo Lien nodded. Mu Xingchen flicked his finger, and a dozen fire spirit talismans flew over. These fire spirit talismans charged into the jade talisman formation without any hindrance and immediately enveloped several jade talismans inside. Upon seeing this, Mo Lien and Duan Yu promptly stepped forward. A bewitching flame rose from each of their hands and soared into that fire spirit talisman formation. After a loud bang, those jade talismans instantly turned into jade powder and dissipated into the air. Thus, the trapping array was broken. However, the lightning layer above became more and more agitated, and a layer of thunder and lightning struck down. What are you striking for? Isn't it better to save your energy and strike when you break through? Duan Yu grumbled irritably as he reached out to set up a defensive barrier. When he looked at Mo Lien, he saw that the brat had blocked the lightning bolts with a layer of black flames, completely unaffected. Let's go. Mu Xingchen was an impatient person. He summoned a water-type spirit artifact and beckoned the two of them over. As soon as the spiritual tool entered the water, it automatically sank into the water and turned into the appearance of a large carp. After Duan Yu and Mo Lien entered together with him, the spiritual weapon started to move rapidly, speeding forward. However, the speed at which the spirit tool traveled through the water was far slower than the speed at which the three of them were flying through the lightning zone. However, now that he was ambushed and had to fight against the lightning, his speed was inevitably much slower. It would be faster to sit in the spirit tool and chase after them. Moreover, it could effectively avoid many obstacles. Who's scheming against us? Duan Yu asked with a frown. It was obvious that the talisman formation was waiting for him and Mo Lien. If it weren't for Mu Xingchen, a great talisman practitioner who was familiar with talisman formations, perhaps he and Mo Lien would have to waste some more time inside that trapping array. Of course, the person who set up this array should be very clear that it was absolutely wishful thinking to completely trap them with just that talisman formation. Chapter 30-40. He was merely stalling for time? Duan Yu abruptly looked up and met Mo Lien's eyes. Eldest brother-in-law, hurry up. Jojo is definitely in trouble. Mo Lien naturally thought of this as well. This person did everything possible to stop them here, so he must be targeting Jojo. Mu Xingchen also wanted this spirit tool to hurry up, but unfortunately, this spirit tool wasn't very useful. Duan Yu glared at Mo Lien. A divine weapon master doesn't even have a spirit tool that can quickly enter the water? Prince Mo really wanted to spit on his face. After holding it in for a while, he squeezed out a word, poor. Poor my ass. From Duan Yu's understanding of this person, it must be that this punk looked down on ordinary materials and would only think of making something when he obtained the best materials. Perhaps it was because he was lazy. Moreover, with his status, he simply didn't need to be like a normal spiritual weapon master who had to make some spirit tools to sell for money in his spare time. He simply didn't need to. Can you forge it faster? Duan Yu grumpily asked. How can that be possible? There's not enough time to forge it on the spot. Mu Xingchen shook his head and was about to reject Duan Yu's outlandish and rude request on behalf of his brother-in-law. However, Mo Lian nodded. All right. Mu Xingchen was flabbergasted. Sir Jojo swiftly returned to Little Li Village and ran along the original path towards the river. How terrifying. Why did she seem to sense that person's aura slowly approaching? Sir Jojo quickly slapped an invisibility talisman on himself and rummaged through his small bag as he ran. Paradise Planet couldn't be used right now, and his divine conscious was locked by the Omega Kotoku, so he couldn't open his inner world at all. Thankfully, ever since he was tricked by the Academy's teachers, Sir Jojo liked to carry a small bag with him whenever he went out. Inside were plenty of emergency talismans and life-saving pills. She ate and ran as fast as she could. In a flash, Sir Jojo rapidly returned to the entrance of Little Li Village and quickly ran along the original path towards the river. Damn, it was almost too late. She could almost feel that person's aura had already extended into the village. So fast. She chewed on a pill in her small mouth and rummaged through her bag. She remembered that 2 days ago, when the 9th Jade Talisman of the Golden Talisman Jade Tome opened, an Earth-level demonstration talisman with spirituality floated down. She had probably stuffed it into her bag as a backup. Hurry up and search, got it. Ever since Arbor opened the 9th talisman of the Golden Talisman Jade Tome, he hadn't had the time to study it properly. She had only looked at this demonstration talisman a few times and had never drawn it. After memorizing it a few times, Jojo made up his mind and slapped the talisman onto himself. Qin Xian's figure instantly appeared at the entrance of Little Li Village. She looked around and her cold gaze swept across the few pedestrians at the entrance of the village. He could clearly feel Jojo's aura just now. How did he disappear in an instant? Exen, the little girl can't have run too far. Ling chased after her all the way. He stopped in his tracks and blinked. Why has his aura disappeared? Qin Xen turned her head and glared fiercely at him. I swear, I didn't do it on purpose. Ling raised 3 fingers above his head and swore solemnly, who knew that the little guy would be so cunning? He actually didn't hesitate to hurt himself and run away. Shut up. Qin Xen interrupted him in annoyance. Look around. Chapter 3041. All right. The few of them split up and searched in all directions. Ling chased in the direction of the river. He brushed past a 5 or 6-year-old child. She paused and turned back to look at the dirty child with a hand full of mud. Then she quickly left. The little boy was wrapped in a very old and tattered jacket. He was squatting by the roots of a tree and playing with the mud. After Feather had run far away, he raised his head slightly and looked in the direction she had left with a lightning-like gaze. Then he retracted his gaze and patted the shabby clothes on his body. It would have been better if he didn't pat it. Now that he patted it, it was so dusty that the child coughed twice and quickly covered his mouth with his small hand. Damn it. Master Jojo gloomily straightened his small body and staggered a few steps forward. This very spiritual Earth-level demonstration talisman was called the Transformation Talisman. As the name suggested, after buying this talisman, one's appearance would change accordingly. Master Jojo only had this one transformation talisman. Naturally, she didn't know what kind of change it would cause. She thought that she could turn into a small animal or something. However, it turned out that the extent of this transformation was only from a 16-year-old girl to a 5 or 6-year-old child. The transformation time was more than 7 days. Speaking of which, it was quite tricky. Right now, she was just an ordinary farmer's child. Naturally, she had to pretend to be more realistic. There was no need for him to walk as if he was flying. The little girl waddled forward for a short distance. Sure enough, she saw Ling turn back and look at her with a deep gaze. Hee, don't think that Master Jojo is a fool. He doesn't know that you are hiding in the dark to watch the real person. She had picked up this dirty and tattered cotton-padded jacket from someone's drying rack. It fit her perfectly. Her disguise was so perfect that Ling, who had only seen her once or twice in his life, would definitely not be able to recognize her. Even if her parents were standing in front of her, they might not be able to recognize her. Hee, You want to recognize Lord Xiao Xiao's identity with your bear-like appearance? Ling secretly laughed at his own suspicions. Then, he turned and searched in the direction of the river. Arbor heaved a sigh of relief, but his slender eyebrows furrowed. With Ling's interference, she couldn't even sneak to Du Chuanjiang's side. Forget it, I'll find a safe place to stay first. Omega Kotoku and his men searched the vicinity of the village. When they reunited, there was a hint of hesitation in their eyes. She can't run that fast. Could he have jumped into the river again? The short and fat man asked as he swung his purple golden hammer. This little girl had a fiery temper. Rather than being caught by them, she might as well jump into the river herself. There's no sign of her at all by the river. Ling Yao cast a seductive glance at the short and fat winter melon. The short winter melon immediately quivered and shut his mouth. Did you see anyone along the way? Speaking of which, I didn't see many people. You guys saw it just now. Under that tree, there was a little brat playing with mud. Ling suddenly stopped talking and looked at Omega Kotoku in astonishment. That's not right. When we used our divine sense to lock this area, it seemed that there was no sign of this brat. Let's go and find her. Omega Kotoku reacted and led his men back to the village. How many times could a group of adults be deceived by a little girl who was neither too young nor too young? Chapter 3042. I knew there was something strange about this little brat. Feather stomped her feet and exclaimed, "To think that I took a few more glances at her. I didn't expect that I would still be fooled by her." Isn't it because you're stupid? Everyone silently ridiculed her in their hearts. At this time, Arbor had already slipped into the backyard of a farmer's house. She took a boy's clothes and casually tidied herself up. She glanced at herself a few times in the water tank and hurriedly tidied her hair a little. She looked at herself worriedly and thought to herself, although my body has become smaller, I should still be able to recognize her if I look closely at her little face. The little fellow took out a herb from a small bag hidden in her cotton-padded jacket. She squeezed the juice from the root onto her palm and smeared it on her face for a while. Then, she ran to the water tank and looked at her reflection. She was so ugly that she almost cried. Her entire little face had an abnormal yellowish color, as if she had a layer of yellow paint. Even she felt disgusted looking at herself. If she walked out like this, she was sure that no one would recognize her. Not to mention, with her current appearance, even her own mother wouldn't be able to recognize her, let alone Omega Kotoku. She confidently walked out of the small courtyard and coincidentally bumped into Feather, who was searching for her. The little fellow walked past her expressionlessly, her footsteps a little unsteady. Although her face didn't show any expression, her heart was a little broken. Why was she always meeting this annoying fellow everywhere? The two of them walked past each other, the little fellow stumbling. Feather suddenly turned around and smiled at her back. She called out sweetly, "Jojo?" Jojo-sama's expression didn't change and his heart didn't skip a beat. He turned a deaf ear and pattered over. When she looked up, her mood was even more broken. Omega Kotoku and the guy with the purple golden hammer had actually followed her and were walking towards her. Jojo-sama ran over expressionlessly. She believed that with such a sallow face, even her lotus wouldn't be able to recognize her. Not to mention Omega Kotoku. As long as Jojo-sama didn't say anything, who would know that this miniature version of a short winter melon was Jojo-sama? Omega Kotoku's voice was actually very magnetic and had a hint of affection. It was quite pleasing to the ear. However, when Jojo heard this, she only felt a chill run down her spine, making her hair stand on end. Impossible. There was no way this guy would recognize her. The little fellow took large strides and calmly walked towards the direction of Du Chunjiang at the village entrance. Stop pretending. Omega Kotoku's voice came from behind her head. Even if Jojo turns into ashes, I'll still recognize him. Arbor, he must be tricking her. If she didn't calm down now, she would definitely be caught red-handed. Jojo-sama had absolute confidence. It was impossible for Omega Kotoku to tell anything from his yellowish face. You want to trick Jojo? Dream on. The little fellow continued to run forward with big steps. Ling almost laughed out loud. Why did she feel that this little fellow was so interesting? You've already revealed yourself, yet you're still lying to yourself in such a hilarious manner. Omega Kotoku flashed and blocked Arbor's path. He looked at her with a half-smile and said, "Jojo, I really do recognize you." Jojo, Sama hated that he couldn't slap his face. Couldn't this guy not recognize her? Why was he so annoying? Every time she was full of confidence, she felt like she was being slapped in the face. Chapter 3043. She had already disguised herself into such a ghastly appearance, so how could someone still see through her at a glance? It was completely illogical. Last time, she also thought that her disguise was perfect. In the end, let alone Mo Lien and Duan Yu, even senior brother Situ could recognize her and greet her. Why the heck was this? This disguise was even more perfect than last time. What did this petite body look like? Her face was also smeared beyond recognition. What was going on? Sir Jojo was perplexed no matter how hard he racked his brains. His pair of pitch-black, watery eyes stared fixedly at Omega Kotoku for a long while. What exactly do you want? His words were tantamount to admitting his identity. On the other hand, Ling was grinning without saying anything, but the short and fat Wintergord who was wielding the purple gold hammer almost dropped it to the ground. His eyes widened as he sized up Arbor from head to toe. Wasn't this little fellow's disguise too different? The second young master was truly impressive to be able to recognize her in this state. Arbor glanced at him impatiently. Because of your nonsense, we're even going to miss the time to go to the mystic realm. I just want to have a good chat with you. I have nothing to do with you. Second young master Chin arrived in front of her with a flash and tapped her sallow forehead with a finger. We can talk, I promise. Arbor expressionlessly looked at him and asked after a long pause, "How did you recognize me?" Ling couldn't resist sniggering. She then called out coquettishly, Little miss, you couldn't have been recognized like this before, right? Just when you think your disguise is perfect, you'll be slapped in the face and recognized at any moment." The little girl expressionlessly looked at her. Nonsense. Ling couldn't resist guffawing. Shin, this little miss is quite interesting. Arbor couldn't be bothered with them and turned around to face Sir Omega Kotoku with the back of his head. This lord is tired and can't be bothered to play a game of cat and mouse with you guys. The second young master reached out and picked her up. The little girl suddenly felt that she was a distance away from the ground. Her almond eyes stared at him, full of dissatisfaction. She roared, "What are you doing? Your legs are short and you walk slowly. We still have to hurry on with our journey. Carrying you will speed up our journey." The second young master said indifferently. Arbor's mind was filled with the words, "You have short legs, short legs, short legs, short legs." On the second young master's face, you couldn't see any charming expression. It was definitely the face of a gentleman. "Your legs are short. This young master will help you." Ha! Ling's unbridled laughter filled the entire village. She lowered her head to look at his legs and chuckled expressionlessly. "Let me ask you, if I don't walk out by myself, what are you going to do?" Arbor asked indifferently as he looked at the second young master who was only an inch away from him with a pair of cold eyes. "Don't you know? Beast." Sir Jojo cursed in his heart. He stretched out his little hand and said impatiently, "Give it to me." The second young master glanced at her and placed the storage talisman that he snatched away earlier on in her palm. Shin, you and the little miss have such chemistry." Chemistry my ass," Sir Omega Kotoku and Sir Jojo said at the same time. However, the words they said were naturally different. "Little miss, why are you so fierce to Shin? He's a very nice person." Ling blinked. Chapter 3044. The little girl naturally responded with an expressionless chuckle. In Ling's eyes, anyone could be considered a good person. A pervert like Omega Kotoku was actually a good person in her eyes. Jojo couldn't understand. However, the little fellow didn't know that her signature expressionless chuckle was simply adorable, You have to swear that you won't touch a single blade of grass or tree here. Arbor said coldly. Chin Exen lowered her head to look at her and nodded without saying a word. Finally, after Zither Gongzi finished writing the oath, Lord Jojo put the oath away and looked at him expressionlessly. Jojo's heart softened. Second Gongzi reached out and patted her little head. Arbor snorted and tilted her head to avoid his hand. Don't be so careless. Ling almost laughed out loud. His eyes wandered around her body playfully. With your small body, it's impossible for anyone to have the thought of being careless. Jojo turned her head and tightly pursed her little mouth. She didn't say anything. Jojo can't even be bothered to talk to you. Speaking of which, although this village was small, there were still hundreds of families. If they were all buried in Chin Xian's hands, it would naturally be a great injustice. The main thing was, why should she bear the infamy of being the main culprit? Most people were extremely ignorant. When the time came, she would definitely be accused of being a femme fatale. One person would spread to 10, and 10 would spread to 100. Who knew what would happen in the end? When that time came, it wouldn't just be rumors of her being arrogant and despotic in the small imperial capital. She would be able to stop them at any time. Although she didn't care that much about her reputation, who would want to be secretly cursed behind her back wherever she went? It was better to put an end to these troublesome matters as soon as possible. Jojo. Second Gongzi reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair on her cheek behind her ear. You must think that it wouldn't be difficult to trick me into writing the oath and then escape, right? Arbor looked ahead expressionlessly. She couldn't be bothered to look at his face. You don't have a chance. Jojo-sama was furious. She was indeed harboring such thoughts, but she had long predicted that her actions would be seen through. But don't say it out loud. It really made Jojo angry. You think you're the smart one? You think you're the only one who knows how to cause trouble? Can you stop threatening me with those random people I don't even know? Okay, I won't do it again. Mr. Omega Kotoku's voice was gentle. For a moment, Arbor thought he was hallucinating. What? He said okay? He actually agreed? Shouldn't he have said, stop dreaming. If you dare to run away again, I'll find a random city and use the lives of all the people in the city to threaten you. Jojo chuckled. I won't lie to you. Chin Xian said softly, as long as you don't act like a hedgehog when you see me and talk to me about everything, I'll do anything for you in the future, okay? Don't think that I don't know that you're trying to coax me like you're coaxing a pet. I don't believe you. Xiao Mu's beady black eyes swiveled around. My lotus is about to catch up. Mr. Omega Kotoku couldn't help but sneer. Not so fast. Once my Ren is here, you're dead. Sama said expressionlessly. Don't blame me for not reminding you. Wait for me to get help. Mr. Omega Kotoku suddenly moved closer to her. His jade-like handsome face gradually enlarged in front of her. Chapter 3045. Sir Jojo instantly shut up and retreated vigilantly. This scoundrel actually dared to come so close. Did he want to die? The little fellow glared with her pitch-black eyes and angrily said, What are you doing? What are you doing? If you keep blabbering on and on, I'll use my own method to shut you up. Arbor! Exclamation point. No one had ever dared to be so impudent to this darling. Jojo, the little emperor, was blabbering on and on. This fellow really wanted to die. The little emperor glared at him a couple of times, glaring back. Then, he retracted his gaze and turned his little head away. They quickly left the village and headed in the direction of the Red River Canyon. On the other hand, Arbor was rather taken aback and felt a bit strange. It seemed that this Omega Kotoku was still heading in the direction of the shrine? But if he wanted to forcefully take her away, shouldn't he have found a better route? Since they were heading in the direction of the Red River Canyon, then Prince Mo and the others would catch up sooner or later. She didn't know where her Lien went, nor did she know what Sapling and the others were up to. It didn't look like it was because the spirit realm was advancing, so why couldn't she contact Sapling no matter what she did? Don't worry, Mo Lien and Duan Yu won't catch up that quickly. Don't worry my ass. Arbor grumpily thought. Because flying was prohibited, Omega Kotoku and the others could only use their divine power to increase their speed. They arrived at the entrance of the Red River Canyon in the evening. Arbor strongly requested a certain someone to put her down and climbed up a boulder that was half the height of a person. Looking down from here, they could see a deep V-shaped valley that stretched far ahead with no end in sight. The crimson rock walls were tall and dangerous, with ancient vines winding around them. They could see the afterglow of the setting sun shining at the end of the narrow path in the distance. They were standing on higher ground. If they wanted to pass through the Red River Canyon, they first had to descend from the top of this cliff. In the past, floating in the air was no problem at all, but now Jojo-sama looked at Omega Kotoku with an expressionless face. Where is the temple? It's said to be at the end of the Red River Canyon. Second young master lowered his head to look at her, and asked gently, Jojo, aren't you going to change back? With your short stature, it's not convenient for you to go down. Do you think I'm a monster? Could he transform just like that? Arbor had a cold expression that said, I don't understand what you're talking about. He turned his head and a vine drilled out of his wrist and climbed along the rock wall. I'll go first. Everyone was speechless. With your small arms and legs, by the time you reach the bottom of the cliff, the sky will probably be dark and bright again. Mr. Jojo glanced at them. Before he could take a step forward, his arm was grabbed by the second young master. Don't mess around. Chin Exen looked at her helplessly. I'll carry you. Get lost. Was he, Jojo, a loser who needed someone to carry him? Ling looked at him, overjoyed. How about big sister carries you? Jojo-sama looked down at his small arms and legs, and nodded reluctantly. All right then. Seeing that you're a girl, I'll tolerate it. Ling smiled and winked at Chin Exen. Seeing that he looked like he was about to explode, she hurriedly said, Exen, don't worry. This time, I'll take good care of the little girl. I won't let her slip from my hands again. Chin Exen glanced at her indifferently. No need. Chapter 3046. The little girl jumped onto Feather's back and lay there, looking at the second young master warily. Although she had shrunk, there was nothing awkward about being with Chin Exen. However, from an emotional point of view, she was still unwilling to have any further contact with him. Being able to endure the intimacy of touching her head was already Lord Jojo's limit. The young master of Omega Kotoku looked at her helplessly and nodded. All right then. Do you think you can still object? Arbor glanced at him and pulled Feather's hair. Let's go. Feather immediately called out seductively, Hey, don't pull my hair. Who pulled your hair? The little girl's hand froze, then she snorted and retracted her hand. Jojo, don't tell me you waited for me to climb halfway and then retracted the vines and let me fall? Feather carried the little girl and jumped off the cliff, grabbing the green vines released by Arbor with one hand. The little girl said expressionlessly, Do you think I'm as despicable as you, a few shameless old monsters ganging up to capture a child? This child's words were really infuriating, Feather thought bitterly. Adults bullying children, old men bullying babies, men bullying women, despicable. Sir Jojo snorted and turned his head to look into the distance. This area was filled with copper-colored cliffs, and at first glance, it was magnificent and magnificent. Especially now that she was on the cliff, looking at the narrow valley in the distance. The mountains on both sides were majestic and grand, and it looked as if a sword had broken through the path below, outlining a deep valley between heaven and earth, stretching all the way to the front. She couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. She felt that the world was so big, and human strength was so insignificant. What is Jojo thinking about? Let go of my divine sense. Arbor said impatiently. I want to go to the inner world to find something to eat. Hungry? Feather chuckled. With a wave of his hand, he took out a carrot from his inner world and handed it to the little girl. Arbor. She impolitely extended her fist and punched her on the head. This old monster was actually feeding her with carrots? Was Jojo a rabbit? Even a rabbit could bite when it was anxious. Violence, Ling muttered. As he spoke, he had already climbed down the cliff. As soon as her feet touched the ground, she felt the weight on her back lighten. Turning her head, she saw the Omega Kotoka hurriedly reach out and pull the little girl down from her back, carrying her to the side. "Let go!" The little fellow stomped its short legs and roared in annoyance. "Impudent fellow, you actually dare to grab Lord Xiao Xiao, who gave you the guts?" Second young master put her down and stroked her little head. "It's already late. Let's go to the cave abode ahead to rest for the night. We'll leave when the sun rises." Arbor looked at him in confusion. What a strange fellow. He actually dared to stop. Was he waiting for her lotus? "Don't worry. With Emolien's IQ, it will take at least a day and a half for them to get here." She wanted to slap him. Arbor said angrily with a cold face, "What exactly did you do? Do you want to know?" Omega Kotoku lowered his head and glanced at her. He waved his hand and said, "Come with me." It wasn't that she really wanted to follow him. It was just that after a day of being in the water, jumping off a cliff, and running for so long, Xiaomu also looked a little tired. Since Omega Kotoku said that he wanted to rest for the night, then so be it. Chapter 3047. I'll let her rest for the night and find a chance to escape tomorrow. With that thought in mind, Lady Xiao Xiao walked into a cave near the cliff. "Wait a minute." Second young Master Qin lifted her up, causing a certain someone to fly up and kick him in anger. There was now another footprint on her light-colored robe. Second Sir didn't take it to heart. He turned his head and nodded to a tall and thin man beside him. That person immediately understood and stepped into the cave. Soon, they heard the hissing and roaring of snakes. After a series of swift and decisive actions, that tall and thin man stepped out of the cave and cupped his hands toward Sir Omega Kotoku. "You can go in now, sir." Arbor kicked him. "Put me down. Don't be noisy. Aren't you tired?" Second Sir carried her into the cave and frowned slightly. "Ayaya, there's a bloody smell." Ling took out a bottle from his sleeve and sprinkled it here and there. After a while, the bloody smell faded and a faint fragrance wafted out of the cave. The fragrance powder from the fragrance shop has pretty good ability to remove the smell. Ling put away the things complacently. When he turned around and saw the little girl's disdainful expression, he couldn't help but be stunned. "What's wrong?" "It stinks." She felt nauseous and wanted to vomit when she smelled the inferior fragrance powder. As she spoke, she really stomped her feet and ran out to vomit. Ling had a blank look on his face as he sniffed around. He sniffed around and sniffed around. "Where is the stench? Isn't it very fragrant?" "Hey, little fellow, the fragrance powder from the fragrance shop is very expensive. Just this small bottle of fragrance powder costs 500 spirit coins." Arbor vomited for a while. When she turned around, her face was slightly pale. It was obvious that she wasn't faking it. "How are you?" Second Sir looked at her worriedly and turned to glare at Ling. "Go get rid of that smell." Ling looked wronged and said pitifully, "How do I get rid of it?" "Go get some hay to clean up the smell." "Oh." Ling pulled the tall and skinny man out of the cave. Not long after, he chopped a bundle of tree branches and brought them in. After burning for a while, Lady Xiao Xiao walked back into the cave with a look of disgust on her face. She took out a medicinal herb from the small bag she carried with her, crushed it, and sprinkled the medicinal powder all over the walls. Only then did she feel much better. Expensive doesn't mean good. Mr. Jojo looked at Ling with disdain. What kind of good spices can be sold in that shop? Her incense-making skills are really not that good. It was hard to imagine that there would be a group of people in the capital following him. It was simply hilarious. Ling blinked. "Little girl, do you have any good spices to sell?" "Oh right, you're an alchemist, so you must know a lot of ways to beautify your skin. Tell me about them." "You're an old monster. You're already so old, yet you're still thinking about beautifying yourself. You're simply shameless." Arbor looked at her expressionlessly. "Do you want a special beautifying cream? It improves the quality of the skin and nourishes the skin. It's most suitable for people who are always on the move outside, exposed to the wind, sun, and rain." Yes. Ling's eyes suddenly brightened and she nodded repeatedly. 1,000,000 spirit coins for a bottle. Everyone's lips twitched as they subconsciously glanced at the second young master. Omega Kotoku was baffled. It wasn't like this little girl had been selling things for a day or two. Why was she looking at him? Chapter 3048. It's so expensive. Can it be cheaper? Ling blinked and asked with a pained expression. Shameless. You want to cheat me of my money? You're an old monster who has lived for hundreds of years. How can you lack money? Don't be funny. 990,000 is the lowest price, Arbor said expressionlessly. You just said that expensive doesn't necessarily mean good. It's different if it's expensive. I definitely have my own reasons for being expensive. Arbor interrupted him coldly. Are you buying it or not? I only have one bottle. Buy. Ling felt pained as he took out the money. Can you give me something extra? The short and fat man's eyebrows and mouth twitched. Looking at the scene in front of him, he felt indescribably strange. Does this kid have any self-awareness as a hostage? He's actually peddling business among us. Forget it. You're so long-winded. Since you carried me all the way here, I'll give you a 3-day beautifying pill. What does a 3-day beautifying pill mean? Arbor looked at him as if he was looking at an idiot. It means that you can try it for 3 days. Once you take this beautifying pill, you can feel the unique beautifying effect for 3 days. After 3 days, you'll return to your original appearance. You can buy a permanent beautifying pill for 2 million spirit coins. Everyone was speechless. You're not only evil but you're also good at doing business. A 3-day trial period? You're obviously setting a trap for Ling, who loves to show off, to jump into it. Okay, I'll try. Ling nodded and reluctantly took out money to buy a bottle of beautifying cream and a beautifying pill for a 3-day trial. If you use it well, you can introduce it to your old sisters. Arbor said expressionlessly. Our shop is near Huachi Street in the south of the city. It's called Heavenly Pill House. You can go there and take a look when you have time. This time, even Ling couldn't help but twitch his mouth and look at Arbor, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. What the hell is an old sister? Okay, let's go to sleep. Arbor was exhausted after a long day. He stretched out his small hand in front of the Omega Kotoku. Betting. This group of people had sealed her divine sense and prevented her from using her inner world. Apart from the few things she could use in her small pouch, she couldn't take out anything else. Aren't you hungry? Mr. Omega Kotoku raised his hand and patted her head. Let's eat first. Sir Jojo originally wanted to reject this fellow, but after thinking about it, he realized that he would only have the strength to run if he was full. Thus, with a stoic expression, he stomped over to the fire and sat down. Apart from young Master Omega Kotoku and Ling, the other 4 God State warriors were the short and fat man, Fei Zhuang, the tall and thin man, and the twin brothers, Tang Quan and Tang Li. Among them, the fat guy who was at the 7th level of the God realm had the highest cultivation. At this time, the 2 brothers, Tang Quan and Tang Li, were sitting in front of the fire, busily roasting 2 wild game. The fat guy had pulled out the tendons and skinned the snake that had been entrenched in the cave before, planning to make snake stew or something for everyone. Arbor was a bit disdainful, but when the snake stew was served, the aroma was very tempting. She took the small bowl that the fat guy handed over and drank 2 mouthfuls. She realized that this person's cooking was really good. As a result, Xiao Qiao's tensed brows relaxed a little after eating the meal. Ling secretly winked at young Master Omega Kotoku, using his eyes to signal to him, "Can you tell? This is a little foodie." After eating and drinking to his heart's content, Sir Jojo carried his bedding to the dry haystack in the corner of the wall. He lay down and rolled around in the bedding. Too lazy to pay attention to anyone, he simply went to sleep. Chapter 3049. In the middle of the night, Sir Jojo rubbed his eyes in a daze, sat up, and walked out of the cave with his short legs. Under the pitch-black night sky, only a faint ray of moonlight shone on the person outside the cave. Xiao Mu's footsteps paused, and she expressionlessly walked past him. She ran a bit further, and after she finished relieving herself, she walked past him again with a wooden expression. "Xiao Qiao." Second young master sighed faintly. I remember everything now. Xiao Mu's body stiffened in fright from his sudden words, and her hair stood on end as she looked at him warily. The young master of Omega Kotoku waved at her. Seeing that she was still 18 steps away from him and didn't want to come over at all, he walked to her side, pulled her hand, and sat down on a stone stool. Do you remember too? Sir Jojo had a strange expression that said, I don't understand what you're talking about. She sized him up from head to toe. I remember everything. About you. Although some of my memories are still blurry, I can piece together a lot of information when I string them together. Stop pretending. He glanced at her. You recognized me the moment you saw me at the entrance of Seekong Planet's Qin estate. Jojo looked at him coldly. After a while, he squeezed out a few words from between his teeth. Nonsense. Is it really nonsense? He flipped his hand, and a small person dressed in bright red walked around in his palm. Although the figure was very faint, the facial features were especially clear. Arbor had goosebumps all over when she saw it, and she almost jumped up from the stone stool. She reached out to grab the figure. What is this? This is half of your soul. Has your soul been very unstable ever since you reincarnated? That's because your soul self-destructed in your previous life. Arbor's pupils contracted. She was dazed for a while before she couldn't help but ask, How did you know? This is just my deduction and guess. Actually, my memories of this period are also very vague. Omega Kotoku stared at her intently, his fingers twitching slightly. Finally, he couldn't help but rub her temples. Jojo, you're back. Shouldn't we let bygones be bygones? Think about how grateful you were to me when I carried you out of the tunnel. If it wasn't for that woman from the Sure family, we would have been married and even, why are there so many ifs? Arbor reached out to grab the wisp of soul in his palm. There are no ifs. There will never be ifs. She thought that Qin Xian wouldn't give it to her so easily, but unexpectedly, he didn't stop her. Instead, he silently watched her take back the broken shadow soul body. With such a bad personality, you deserve to be single your whole life. Jojo snorted. How many other soul remembrance like this do I have outside? Qin Xian couldn't help but laugh. This is your soul remembrance, you should know best. But she didn't remember anything? Lord Jojo glanced at him unhappily, thinking, how could he not know about it? She subconsciously pulled out the crescent-shaped jade pendant hanging around her neck. Ever since her master gave her this soul-calming chilled jade, her soul had been much more stable. Chapter 3050. Was it because she had self-detonated her soul before? But she really couldn't remember anything. Jojo. Omega Kotoku looked down at her and said softly, no matter what happened in the past, at least for now, I want to get along with you. Can't we start from the beginning? Start from the beginning? Arbor's gaze wavered slightly and he thought, it's easy to start from the beginning, but many things can never return to the way they were in the beginning. Firstly, the mood is completely different, and secondly, the people I see, hear, and meet are also completely different. This is the so-called things remain the same, but people change. Suddenly, a burst of ghostly wails and howls came from all directions. Xiao Mu looked up and saw men and women dressed in native attire sliding down the mountain wall one after another like agile monkeys. They held weapons in their hands as they yelled crazily. In the blink of an eye, the two of them were surrounded in the middle. Sir Jojo looked at these monkey-like natives expressionlessly and didn't say anything. She was just a child at the moment, and if anything happened, the adults would take the blame. Qin Xian frowned. This area should be the territory of the Red River tribe, but looking at the attire of these natives, they clearly looked like aliens and weren't from the Red River tribe. Oh? Hundreds of natives surrounded the two of them, and the commotion was so big that it drew Ling and the others out of the cave. If you don't want to die, scram, Qin Xian said coldly. Xiao Mu was at a loss for words as those natives waved their hands and feet in front of them. Ooh, who are you people? Ling touched his handsome little face and shouted angrily, why did you come to disturb my sleep in the middle of the night? Oh wow, A woman who looked like the leader of the natives revealed her black belly and held a cane in her hand. The moment she raised it high, all the voices disappeared in succession. The woman who looked like the leader pondered for a while and suddenly said word by word in stiff imperial capital language, "This mountain is mine. This tree was planted by me." The corners of Ling's mouth twitched. His head was shrouded in black fog. He raised his eyes and glanced at the second young master's darkened face through the crowd. At this moment, the native female leader had already read out the words "leave behind the toll." Suddenly, in the middle of the crowd, in the void, a circular vortex suddenly appeared, as if an endless stream of air was being sucked into it. The few natives were caught off guard for a moment. Their faces were slightly pale as they stabilized their bodies. They were almost pulled over by the airflow. The Aborigine leader was shocked and quickly knelt down with his clansmen. As he kowtowed, he muttered some words that no one could understand. In the void vortex, a long strand of black hair suddenly brushed out, followed by a slender hand that reached out and grabbed the edge of the void, pulling it slightly to the left and right. Half of her body peeked out from the hole. Under the night sky, there was a hint of coldness and seduction. Prince Mo's cold gaze fell on everyone present. His pair of cold eyes stared coldly at Chinexin. "So it's you who is playing tricks." Although the young master of Omega Kotoku didn't show it on his face, he was very shocked on the inside. Not for anything else, but Emo Lien's method of tearing open the void and suddenly appearing was really shocking. Chapter 3051. Prince Emo leaped out of the tear in the void. This was clearly a bit frightening. For a moment, everyone was caught off guard and did not react. They stared at him in a daze. Lady Xiqiao's eyes lit up slightly. She stretched out two small hands eagerly, but then she lowered her head and looked at herself in distress. He was so small and his body was like a little bean sprout. Emo Lien appeared in front of Sir Jojo in a flash. She reached out and picked him up. Her eyes were full of confusion. "Jojo, how did they do this to you?" This was not caused by anyone else. It was Lady Qiao Qiao who had dug a hole for herself and willingly jumped into it. But would Sir Jojo tell him? Bang! A strange-looking spiritual weapon that looked like a big-headed carp flew out of the tear in the void and landed on the ground with two thuds. Soon, a white figure flashed out of it. His body swayed a little, and then he stood aside with narrowed eyes. Then, Mu Xingchen used his speed to escape from the big carp spirit weapon. He rushed to the side of a tree, leaned against the tree, and started vomiting. "Big brother, what's wrong?" Sir Jojo looked at Emo Lien in confusion. "It's nothing. He's probably dizzy and wants to vomit." Emo Lien touched his little face and looked at him worriedly. "Jojo, wait for me here." She then put the little guy down and looked coldly at the people from Omega Kotoku. A bundle of black fire instantly lit up in his hand, and Emo Lien arrived beside Second Qin and the others in the blink of an eye, making a move without saying a word. At this time, Second Qin had already recovered from his slight shock, and he looked at him with a rather grave expression as he asked, "You comprehended the power of nothingness for the other three special powers outside of the five spirits?" He tore open the void and rushed over. No one could imagine how he did it. The power of nothingness had disappeared for nearly 1,000 years. The talent of the crown prince of the divine land was simply demonic. Catch my Jojo? You sealed her divine sense, didn't you? Emo Lien couldn't be bothered to waste his breath on him, and with a thought, a silver longsword jumped out of his hand. "You were the one who set up the trapping formation in the Du Chunjiang to stop us, right?" Emo Lien narrowed her eyes and said coldly, "Explode." Boom! The self-destruction of a spiritual weapon was already unstoppable, let alone a divine weapon. On the side, Ling's expression shifted slightly. Just as he wanted to charge over, he was blocked by Duan Yu, who flashed forward. The young man was dressed in white and looked elegant and handsome. He blinked his peach blossom eyes and said to her with a smile that was not a smile, "You want to gang up on me? Your opponent is me. You think you can stop me?" Ling was still grinning. With a twist of his finger, a narrow and sharp dagger landed in his palm. 10 moves. Duan Yu curled his lips and said with a nod, "If I can last 10 moves, what will you say, lady boy?" Ling's eyes narrowed into crescents. Little big brother, you can talk after you fight. Sir Jojo, who was originally expressionlessly watching from the side, suddenly shifted his eyes in Ling's direction. The more he listened to the two's conversation, the more he felt something was amiss. Suddenly, Sir Jojo glared with his hands on his hips and pointed at Ling. He looked up and asked Duan Yu, "What? What did you say? You called her a ladyboy? And you called her a ladyboy. Could it be she's a man?" Chapter 3052. Duan Yu's handsome face darkened, and he suspiciously sized up the little fellow. "You think he's a girl?" Arbor was flabbergasted. "Ah, my dear Qiao, could it be that you were taken advantage of by this punk?" "No," the little fellow expressionlessly replied. Duan Yu abruptly burst into laughter and looked her up and down, his gaze involuntarily revealing a hint of mockery. "That's true. How could someone take advantage of you with your childish appearance?" Xiao Qiao's face was expressionless, her wooden face was expressionless. "Don't think that your freaking laughter can cover up your amused expression. Then can you tell me why you became like this?" As Duan Yu spoke, he had already pulled out his handy raven bone fan and flew it towards Feather. "Do you think I'll tell you?" "Ha!" Sir Jojo pursed his lips and didn't say a word. Clang clang. Two crisp sounds clashed, and a faint trace of hesitation involuntarily slipped through Feather's eyes. This punk in front of him looked like he was at the God Realm, but the power he contained was far above the God Realm. There wasn't much of a difference between him and him? What was going on? Could it be that this punk also used an aura-concealing talisman or something similar and used a smokescreen to lower his cultivation realm? When Fei Zhuang and the twin brothers, Tang Quan and Tang Li, saw this, they were about to fly over when the surrounding natives started making a ruckus again. A native elderly walked up and suddenly prostrated himself on the ground. Tears streamed down his face as he whimpered about something unknown. This elderly man spoke a string of words, but Sir Jojo expressed that he didn't understand a single word. Tang Quan and Tang Li's path was blocked by several hundred natives and couldn't pass at all. A vicious glint flashed through Tang Quan's eyes, and he was about to impatiently split these natives apart. Unexpectedly, Mo Lien, who was fighting with the young master Omega Kotoku, turned around and mumbled something to that native elderly man. That old geezer immediately revealed a deeply grateful expression and bowed several times toward Mo Lien. Behind him, the native female chief also knelt down with the group of natives and piously kowtowed several times to Crown Prince Mo before retreating to the side with her people. Everyone looked at our dear Mo Lien in bewilderment. Lady Qiao Qiao's face was also filled with confusion. Jojo's Lotus actually knew how to speak the native language? Who knew what he was babbling about earlier, but those natives' expressions when they looked at him were all very reverent, practically worshipping him as a god. Right now, Mo Lien didn't have the time to explain too much to other people. His entire mind was focused on second young Master Qin. The moment he raised his hands slightly, a few faint wisps of black flames floated up from his side, slowly condensing and shrinking. The black flames were like blooming ink-colored lotuses, floating around his body, and very quickly, they bloomed in clusters. Omega Kotoku's expression changed slightly, and the moment he took a few steps back, he saw the ink-colored lotuses streaking across his eyes like shooting stars, all gathering in front of him. Suddenly, there was a loud tremor, and all the ink-colored lotuses bloomed to the peak at the same time. Suddenly, as if they couldn't withstand this huge force, they all shattered and turned into fine powder, shooting towards the young master Omega Kotoku from all directions. Young master! The thin red blood vessels in Tang Quan's eyes were about to burst. This time, not to mention the second young master, even if Ling was in front of him, it would be difficult for him to escape unscathed. Ling was also secretly shocked, and exerted strength in his feet, flying towards the direction of Omega Kotoku. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.